Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. This is the She Wolves of Winter. I'm here with Lady Ashley and Lady Steffi, and we're here to talk about Bran in a storm of swords. Lady Ashley.
Hi, I'm Lady Ashley from the Iron Underneath. How are you? Thanks for being here tonight. We're going to talk about Bran. I'm so excited. So I hope you enjoy.
Sorry, Ashley.
Hi everybody, it's Steffi. No reason to check out my page, but we're going to be talking about Bran tonight, and I can't wait.
Okay. Let's see. Ashley, you or Steffi wanna give us your start off?
Steph, do you want to take it?
Um, yeah, sure, why not? Okay. So basically, this whole book is kind of outside of anything important going on. Like Bran starts his own individual journey with his little company right now, and they don't know very much of what's going on aside from the people that they meet at the Golden Tower. I forget what it's called. But from the little, and then you hear about Ramsay and the Boltons, and you find out very little through Summer's dreams of what's going on. And then, yeah, it's basically ends right at the wall at the Night Fort and past the Black Gate. So the first quote that I ended up coming up to was in chapter 1. It said, "Prince of the Green, Prince of the Wolfswood. He was strong and swift and fierce, and all that lived in the good green world went in fear of him." Now, Ashley might have more to say on this. The Wolfswood has a lot of ironwood, so I wonder if she has anything to say on the correlations on that. Then you have also the Blackwood correlation, right, on who used to rule the Wolfswood. And then
Right.
you also have the possibility of the War King, due to the Wolfswood traveling up to Dragonsea Point before some of it was burnt. Obviously the War King was defeated by the Kings of Winter, the Starks, and basically he killed all of his sons, beasts, and green seers, but took his daughters as prizes. Also, this quote, I'm gonna refer to it again when we go do the Night Fort, because I think this is the first quote that hits me when it comes to the Night's King and the story that old Nan revisits. And yeah, it's almost like that that nothing fears me kind of mentality. And also, when you look at this quote as well, and the like, no, like everyone should fear him. It also brought me to Arya's chapter in the Winds of Winter again, and I'll quote that as well. As I cannot be the hero, let me be the monster, and lessen them in fear in place of love. So, like again, it's that fear in place of like being fearful of someone or something in order to gain respect instead of it being through love, which would be Ned's way. Yeah, that's just my thoughts on the first part.
That's awesome, Steffi. Nan, do you want to say anything on that before I do?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that it's just like Steffi says. It's basically the journey from coming out of the crypts when they find Winterfell is burned up, dead people there. They come from hiding and go into the light in through the woods, and it's basically their trip north is what we're covering tonight, and all that happens with them and to them and around them that we can find on their trip to the north. And I have also have the little as a quote too. We'll get into that a little bit later on, Steffi. Ashley, you go for it.
Great, thanks. So, yeah, the journey is really cool because it's, we really hear a lot of judging and mirror I'm getting an echo. Are you guys hearing me okay? I've got a delay. Let me just mute and come back. That's better. Thanks. Okay, so actually looking at a lot of the symbolism of the journey itself, and I actually started looking at the hero's journey just because it goes into so many different characters, Danny, John, Bran, but some people skip steps. John gets every step. Bran also gets almost every step in the hero's journey laid out by Joseph Campbell from Carl Jung. But as far as the as far as the ironwood and the wolfswood goes, it seems to me like, I mean, I can't figure out this ironwood if it's something that, you know, the sentinels too, the soldier pines. It seems like more and more throughout about from A Storm of Swords, maybe at the end of A Clash of Kings, but The Storm of Swords, you really start to hear more and more about the sentinel pines. You know, seeing them so much. Maybe it's because of so many journeys north, but it's just interesting to me that there's always a sentinel pine where there's an oak most of the time. Like you've got the 79 sentinels and then the sentinel trees. And so it's like you've got watchers everywhere. And it's Green Dream that there's a way through to the other side of the wall. And Bran keeps telling him there isn't a way through, isn't a way through, and Jojen says there is because I saw it in my dream. So wonder if, you know, like I said last time, in the Godswood and Winterfell, it reminds me of either like something like alchemy, or if you want to go to the Garden of Eden, since that's something most people know, there's the tree of knowledge, and one is, you know, one's black and one's white. So it makes me think that the ironwood is the tree of good and evil, the tree of knowledge, and the weirwood is the tree of the tree of life. The Yggdrasil tree is the weirwood. The ironwood is the tree of good and evil, the tree of knowledge. So I wonder if there's something about that wood that acts like iron, that holds things in, remembers too, in a different way for somebody else. It's connected to the black stone somehow. I don't know. But with what happened in the Wolfswood, you know, it's got oak, evergreen, black briar, sentinels, soldier pines, hawthorn, beech, ash, chestnuts, ironwoods, and firs. It's got so much wood, and there's so many animals in there, that it sort of made me think about his journey to a Merlin-like character, because Merlin puts King Arthur in a couple different stories through into different animals, almost just like warging. He puts him in ants, he puts him in foxes, he puts him in all kinds of different animals so he can experience what life is like through those animals' eyes. And he puts him in trees also. And I just find it really interesting that the trees are from when they're actually in the Night Fort. And he says it looks like the tree was trying to catch the moon and drag it down into the hole. Bran is always looking at the moon, and he's always noticing the trees, as is John, noticing the moon as well. Those two always, and Arya too, actually. So they're always connected, those three. I find it really interesting that the tree was trying to catch the moon, like when they were in the Night Fort it was like the Night's King is catching the Night's Queen, you know, and trying to pull the moon down because the moon is female. So as far as the Ward King goes, I didn't even really think about that part. I'll have to think about that for a second, and I'll get back to you on that one, because that's a part of it that I should have looked at and I didn't. But yeah, that's kind of what I got so far. I won't go into.
I like that. I like that, Ashley. Especially the part about the Garden of Eden, with the wood being the tree of life and the tree of knowledge being the ironwood. That does make sense, and it's a good reference. But I also found that it kind of reminds you of Robin Hood's forest, in the where the robbers, the outlaws hide out, which it could be another reference to. But it's a huge forest, and like you said, there are all kinds of trees and stuff in there. And the moon is very significant, not like you said with all three of the children that have wolves especially. But when you think about the werewood, we calling it tree of life, but when you think of you think of like werewolves, that's the first thing you think about. And the moon, werewolves are regulated, their cycles are regulated by the moon's cycles. So is the moon and the werewoods, and the fact that it's a were on the front of that wood, and then you've got the tides, regulates the tides as well. So that's part of changing of the seasons as well too, with all of it coming together. So I do like that reference. Very good reference.
Thank you, and I love what you just said. That was really, really cool, because I had something written down. It really fast. Oh, here it is. It's that Halloween, which is in Celtic mythology, and Celtic mythology, Halloween is called Samhain instead. And it actually, Halloween originates from Samhain, and it's an old Druid rite that, with the midnight culmination of the Pleiades cluster of stars. So when we were talking about the Red Wanderer being in the Moon Maid, Steffi, when John was conceived, maybe it could be that it was actually in there in the spring. So, or it could be that it might be, because this ritual, it culminates with midnight and the Pleiades cluster. It was believed that the veil dividing the living from the dead is at its thinnest when the Pleiades cluster culminates and reaches its highest point in the sky, which is at midnight. And I think George says, even in these books, that the wolves howl. They don't howl before midnight. They howl after midnight. And because there's some kind of rule, like, oh no, it wasn't in these books, it's from the Jungle Book, actually. It's the wolves don't howl before midnight because they would scare the other animals into thinking that they were coming for them. And so the other animals got a chance to be in the forest before the wolves started to howl. That was the wolves' time after midnight. So that's really cool. It ties in with the werewolf thought of yours. I like that a lot. And I just thought that, if this rite is at the end of autumn, it's October 31st, that's pretty much the end of their summer. So even if it's a false spring, it's the end, it's the autumn. So darkness and winter are coming at that point. So after Samhain, after Halloween, after the Pleiades cluster, which is probably more like the ice dragon, coincides with midnight, then the veil drops. And I wonder if that's the curtain of light, winter, or if it's just simply the veil that drops between the living and the dead. That's all I have to say on that.
Okay, I'll jump in here. Actually, Biotic Flux actually mentioned Cinderella and the changing at midnight, where she becomes, instead of this princess, she goes into like this transition, which you're mentioning as well, into the servant again. So it's very interesting that he mentioned that. Good analogy. As for, I'm going to jump back a little bit. It's interesting that you mentioned the sentinel pines, because every time Bran keeps mentioning like these trees, all I keep thinking about the 79 sentinels. And to quote you, you said, we have watchers everywhere. That's exactly your words that you just said when you were mentioning the sentinel pines. So it's very interesting because they were, we'll get to it, but they were shoved in the wall for that very reason, right? So it's weird that you just mentioned it without really mentioning the other topic. As for the moon itself, I do find it interesting that you did draw that conclusion, because every time it was mentioning the moon, I also was thinking of Drogo and how he's referred to moon of my life. So whether it's a female, I don't know, but like it's almost like this correlation. Also, when it comes to Bran noticing the ice dragon star, I have to think of Dany being the star and the sun and stuff like that. So that's very interesting as well. But when you were bringing that up, I was continuously thinking of the Stark King, and his name is Walton, and his nickname, or his like AKA name, is the Moon King. So it's very interesting that the seasons are changing. You have this time of night expanding and all this stuff, and surprisingly, you have a king that is named this during this time of season. As for Cynthia, you brought up a good point in the moon and the tides, and that's very interesting when you think about Theon and how he was captured during this book by Ramsay Bolton, and how basically his tides are receding back or being drawn in, and yeah, so he's also going through this change as well without realizing it, and it kind of points it out. As for time in A Song of Ice and Fire, I've always wanted to look deeper into the time, but there's only a few hours that George R. R. Martin uses, right? Like he uses the owl, he uses the wolves, right? So yeah. I've always wanted to know, like, what hours point to what animal. If anyone has that, anyone in the chat, or if like you ladies find it, I would love to know it, because I feel like that would reveal a lot, especially when it comes to Azor Ahai, and how when Melisandre is giving that speech, she says, in this dread hour. So what is this dread hour? Is that referring to an actual time? Because if that's referring to an actual time, that goes outside of the realm of the animals, which are used to describe the time. So maybe it's a certain time that is pointed to as the dread animal. Like, you get what I'm saying? Yeah, that's
totally. I do, and actually I have something to say about that, because I did look into the times. I got really interested in it, and I thought, okay, we've got the mockingbird, the owl, the wolf, the there's a couple, the fox, I think, and there's a couple more that I found. And it seems like, you know, the wolf would seem like it was midnight. And then the hour of whatever is something like the hour of the, I can't remember what it is, but it was something, the hour of the ghost or something like that, that would probably be 3 a.m. And the mockingbird would probably be in the late evening, I thought. You know, mockingbirds kind of I think they bring in the night, don't they? As far as I can remember. And then also they say dusk, dawn, sunrise, and they don't really say sunset. They say what do they say? I guess just dusk, dawn, and sunrise. I don't think I've ever heard them use sunset. So, well, because I do think that it has something to do with that, with what Melisandre's talking about, the dread hour. And I think that's probably from Poe too. It's probably got something to do with the Raven. I'll have to look at that. Dread hour. And then I also, that kind of makes me think of when Bran or Jojen and Mira told Bran that a Stark wasn't at Winterfell, and that, you know, that a Stark always needs to be at Winterfell. And they were talking about that, and I have it written down here somewhere. They said that oh shoot, sorry. I think that it was just something like the fact that sorry, I lost it. I'll find it again, but it was something that there was, when there's not a Stark at Winterfell, the wolves will return, he says. And they talk about how Winterfell is such a safe place, and how everybody goes there for safety in the winter and in times of trouble. They're kind of saying, you know, whether you're at Winterfell or not, if there's a Stark at Winterfell or not, the wolves will always return. So I thought that was kind of cool, that people think and believe that the wolves will always return.
If I may, I've got a few points to touch on. That Samhain, the old Druid custom you were talking about, which is Halloween, that's Scottish, isn't it, Ashley? And
Yeah, I
think, well, the Scottish do the same thing too, I believe. And then
yeah.
the false spring that you were talking about with John being born, you know, it seems to me that, you know, that you had the false spring at the time of, wasn't it during the Harrenhal, tourney of Harrenhal, and it only lasted a few years. So it, John born in the during the false spring. I don't know if it would have been an autumn by that time, you know, because it would have been after the false spring.
Right.
Right. And then the wolf's time, it being after midnight, I thought that was just so fantastic. The ice dragon in the books is something that Osha, the wildling, had taught them to look for the eye of the ice dragon, and that equals always takes them north. Well, you know, we also have a North Star that all the ships and everything through the ages have guided them all over the world using that one North Star that's unchanging, and that's, to me, references the in that. And the sentinel trees, the 79 watchers on the wall, yeah, that's definitely got something. As far as them being watched, when they do get to the mountains, they definitely are being watched. And Bran actually sees some of the mountain clans watching them through the eyes of summer. So, you know, it is known that Bran is alive. At least in the mountain clans, he has been seen by them and by the Ironborn kid, Wix.
Right.
Yeah. And the Dread Hour, going to that, I think that the Dread Hour is that Melisandre is talking about this hour of the approaching um, night, the hour before midnight, which would be when the actual night falls and doesn't end, where they lose the sun, for generations. And I think that dread hour is the hour that they're dreading. It's what's approaching them, and the hours leading up to midnight is where they're at now, which is leading up to approaching long night. Um, and the dusk, dawn, sunrise, but you also have moonrise as well. And the wolves returning. That was Jojen that told the little that the wolves will return, when he was saying that, when there was a Stark in Winterfell, a girl could walk around in her name day,
Right.
and such. Okay, that's my catching up. Steffi, I see you.
Thanks for clearing that up. I could not remember who said it, but it was Jojen to Little. Yeah.
Okay, so when it comes to like when you were discussing the times and the fox and the ghost and the mockingbird and stuff like that, all I can think about is, okay, obviously time is a very universal feature. So you wonder if either of these times are also given to, like, in order for you to name a time for me, it would have to be given to someone as an honor, kind of like a key to the city almost. Like I can see Cregan Stark being given the Hour of the Wolf because of his time in power and from passing those judgments and being like, oh, this is the Hour of the Wolf now for your service, like your time in office, basically. Also, I feel like the sigils and the times also have a lot to do with each other. So if there is a ghost, then maybe there's a house that involves a ghost. I'm pretty sure there is, such as the flock. Yeah, there's a reaper. I'm pretty sure. I forget what the house's name is, but yeah, I'm pretty sure there is. Also, like for the fox, you would think of House Florent and whatnot. So yeah, I'm pretty sure there is something going on there. It's just, for me, George R. R. Martin hasn't given us enough of the times. Like, he hasn't given us 12 hours. And if there is a 24-hour clock, that would be even more hours to look at. Also, for the protection of the Starks, see, there's a huge contradiction with what Little says to me. Like, no one is truly ever safe. You know what I mean? Like, you're talking about under this whole entire party, when they were journeying north to south with the King's Party, you're talking about Joffrey got his hand basically almost bitten off, right? So just because there's a Stark at Winterfell doesn't necessarily mean that everything's all hunky-dory. But I do see how, if people are educated enough to realize it, then they would understand that, such as Theon Stark and mounting the heads on spikes, right, the Andals, right, that is protection for your people. That is, but for the other people, that is viewed as being very dangerous. And the same can be said about Brandon Stark, or Ice Eyes. He basically gave the slavers to the slaves and then ripped out their entrails and then hung them on trees, and like weirwood trees. So if you're a slaver, you wouldn't necessarily view that as being safe, right? And then you're also looking at the right to first night, I think it is. If you're like, basically what Roose Bolton did was have this right to the man of the wife, that wouldn't have been a great thing, and she couldn't necessarily walk around naked, because that would make her more of a target. So there is a contradiction to what he's saying, but I do understand that there was prosperity, right? You're talking about the North is the only province or state that isn't in debt in the Seven Kingdoms. So that's very, like, for that aspect alone, of course it's going to be better because there's going to be less thieving. There's going to be. Did I just drop out?
You're still there. Go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, my like whole screen froze for a second. It freaked me out. Okay, so, and then, yeah. As for Jojen, I can understand why George R. R. Martin is naming it A Dream of Spring, which is a dream of the worlds will come again, right? Which is referencing that exact quote. So yeah, it's all very interesting, that whole entire cycle. But while we are on the topic of Trojan, I also find it very interesting that we mentioned this earlier on in his earlier chapters, right? Especially at Clash of Kings. He basically comes and him and his sister pick out Bran out of both Rickon, right? And to deem him as this this flying wolf who needs to be escaped, which is, to me, all the Starks could have been that. But it's very interesting that he thinks that he doesn't have enough information in order to train Bran. I also think if when we're talking about this in the Night of the Laughing Tree, they believed that it was a Crannogman and most likely their father. Why would they send Bran north of the wall instead of sending him south? Right? Like, why wouldn't they send him to the God's Eye for those training, and why north? Like, it's almost like if you want to go to an art school, you go to an art school. If you want to go to a political school, you go to a political school. Like, it's almost like there are different regions where you learn this this trait or these abilities. Also, I find it interesting that Jojen, in the very first chapter, is telling Bran to make rocks and to kind of make them in a pattern, which references the circles that we see more in the show, the spirals of the, who am I thinking of? Ashley, you could probably mention the house, the Mallisters, I think.
Massey,
Oh,
I think it is. Yeah,
and the weird spirals, and they continue, and they're in threes. It's kind of like the Druid symbol. Yeah. And I find it weird.
Yeah, the Celtic. Yeah, I think it's Massey. Yeah.
So I do find it weird that Jojen wants him to make these particular symbols, especially if winter is coming and they're just going to be covered up anyways. Like, I can understand him marking a tree, right? Like, kind of like what bears do to mark their territory or to find their way back home and so on. But why would you want the rocks? Like, what would that provide? Unless it was like some sort of conduit. That's the only thing I can think of. But yeah, that's about it.
Oh, I like that you said conduit, because those spirals in Celtic lore, I mean, I don't know if you know the Newgrange tomb in Ireland, but it's a huge circular, it looks like a crop circle, but it's a really old, I think it might even be older than Stonehenge, maybe around the same time, but it's a huge circle, like a circular tomb, where there's a circle of stones, or there's a circle of stones that's now covered up, wood underneath it, and they were actually tombs that go in a circle. And this actually ties into the hours of the marked by animals, is that in the Newgrange tomb, you enter the tomb and the top of it has a cross over it, which is a circle with the cross inside is the alchemical symbol for earth. So when you go into the tomb and you're supposed to walk around, and there are kings that are buried under there. So they represent each planet. So I wonder if are marked by animals because they're marked for certain, like what planet that animal represents, or maybe what house that something like that. Yeah, and I think you might be right about the sigils tying into it, because it's almost like the rings in the show that go around their planet, that history in the sky, like Saturn's rings with your history on it going around you at all times. So it's almost like that. It seems like it's like a remembering how it's supposed to go, maybe. I don't know. I don't know what it's for, but it seems to have something to do with the planets. And I think that they're drawing maybe those circles, those spirals, is the reason I mentioned the New Grange tomb is because above the tomb itself is a huge stone that's so big they don't know how anyone got it up there. Now it's on the ground in the front of the tomb, but it's covered in those spirals. So it's supposed to be, they say it marks the entrance of the other world, the underworld. And it also marks the circle of death, rebirth, life, resurrection. So maybe it's marking the way to a journey, or maybe it's actually marking the way of the grain seer. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I got something. I want to jump in right in here on for a little bit. As to no one is truly safe, and yeah, that's how we're going back to the Stark and Winterfell, and I think Little had it in right in one aspect. There was more stability in the North, Stark, and that there is more law and order. And you know where you stand when there is a Stark in power. You don't know where you stand with the Bolton in power. He's liable to skin you as to look at you, or either one of them. So, and others, the Starks have married into so many of these families, and I'm sure the other families have got the same, have intermarried as well. But the Starks are familial with all the houses of the North. Said to Stannis, everyone is related. The Starks are related. What was it Nan said? Bran's grandmother's mother's mother was Flint, I believe it was. So, and that's where he gets, she says, that's where he gets that his abilities to desire to walk and climb, and to always be a climber. And as far as the rite of the first night practice, yeah, that's still practiced in the books, in the mountain clans, and I think the Umbers and some of them actually still practice that in the current timeline. As far as the green seers going down to the God's Eye, I think that they would have had to travel through a lot of hostile territory to have gotten there. And evidently, Jojen, from what Leaf said, is that Bloodraven, or in the book and the show, is the last green seer. So maybe there aren't any green seers at the God's Eye. That's a possibility. Reason for them going north. And if they're not, it seems like surely the Reeds would know whether there are any at the God's Eye or not. As far as the spires, I think those are connected to the children of the forest. I think that goes back to what we were saying in the previous. This is the symbol of their temple, and this is, he tells Bran when he's in a wolf dream to mark his territory. And I'm taking that to mean hike your leg and pee on a tree. And why are they marking their territory? Is the wolf going ahead and finding the area and marking the territory so Bran and them can find the way, or what? Yeah, I think the spires are entirely to do with the children of the forest. And as far as the entrance to the underground, I found that very interesting, that it could be either the cave that they enter into at Blood Ravens once they do get past, or even the night fort considered the entrance to the underworld when they go through the tunnel there. And that's all I got for now.
That's great. Steffi, do you want to say something, or do you want me to go?
I'll go. Okay, so when it came to I believe Ashley said this, the rings of a tree in the stump. I find that very interesting that you pointed it out, because maybe the rings of the weirwood trees or any other tree is indicative of the green seers, and like it starts with 1 and then 2, and then the more green seers that are enveloped into the tree or become gods and die and then work into the tree itself and become a part of the godhood. Maybe that's what creates this huge, massive weirwood, if you get what I'm saying. So maybe it once was the weirwood or the heart tree at, what is that? Raven Tree Hall. And then you're also talking about the Stark tree being much smaller, which means there was a lot less green seers. You get what I'm saying? Like how, like maybe they're indicative of the years in power kind of thing. Yeah, that was very interesting. As for the spiral, I also think if you're going to create a spiral, instead of like, it's easy just to hit like a tree, like any hunter, like I'm pretty sure a lot of American people who hunt probably know how easy it is to spot a trail of an animal. So for me, like it's not that competent of a ward to do that, just to mark a tree, but to make a spiral, that is indicative of a competent ward who can do those things. As for Cynthia, I do believe, I do think it's a good idea that you pointed it out, that the Starks have blood ties to each one of the families in the North. And this kind of goes into the kinslaying thing and whether it's true or it's not true. And the guest right, is it true or is it not true? Because if they're all family, then technically they're not a guest anymore because they're family. Like if my aunt was to come over, she's technically not a guest, she's family. You get what I'm saying? But if a friend were to come over, she would be a guest because we're not blood related. So I found that very interesting as well. But yeah, that's all I had to say.
Yeah, I do. I find that really interesting too. It's guest right seems like something that has been broken so many times, and it's one of those things that it's like if it breaks completely down, then society will break down. Like there's no safety whatsoever. You at least had that, in this medieval crazy world where you could die at any time, you at least had that, so that really, it makes me feel like it's being mentioned, it's being broken so many times now. It was broken, Bloodraven broke it, so many people have broken it up until the Red Wedding, which was just so awful in so many ways. I mean, it was one of the worst betrayals of all time. And it was in history too. The wedding, what he fashioned it after, the Black Massacre, whatever it's called. So I was gonna talk about the Howland Reed and the Children of the Forest. When you guys were talking about or I guess it was Nan that was talking about the Crannogmen, maybe it was you, Steffi, talking about the Isle of or the God's Eye and the Crannogmen. That story that Jojen and Mira tell when they're telling the Night of the Laughing Tree story to Bran. And they're talking about how Howland Reed got out of Greywater Watch and to Harrenhal and through the men. That he actually, when he went by the, when he had to get through places where somebody would see him, he would put his boat on top of his head and walk underneath the water. And I thought, this is going to happen at some point at the Twins. Somebody's going to do that to get by the Twins, maybe. You know, it's a really good way for somebody to get through those gates, because it's just, you know, that something's got to happen there where somebody can get through. And I think that's the foreshadowing of it. The other thing was, the comment about if I can't be the hero monster, and the tie-in with Joffrey there. Interestingly enough, right before we started this, I looked, it sounded so familiar that I thought that's Shakespeare, and I looked it up, and it's Richard III. And Richard III so much reminds me of the Lannisters. And the quote from Richard III is, "And therefore, since I cannot prove a lover to entertain these fair, well-spoken days, I am determined to prove a villain and hate the idle pleasures of these days." So it's like, it's just the same thing of going into winter. Like, we've had spring, we've had these beautiful days, and now we're going to go into these dark days. So it's cool tie-in that Joffrey is on the throne at that time. That you were mentioning Joffrey, and how is he on the throne that time? Yeah. So it's interesting that you were mentioning that quote in tandem with Joffrey, because it does fit totally. And what was the other thing? There was one more thing. Oh, marking the territory. It's like he's making sure someone can find him, or someone can follow him, or Jojen and Mira are making sure of that. And who would that be other than Howland Reed or a Stark? I don't know who else it would be. So, I mean, I guess it could be, I don't know. I don't think they're thinking about Arya or, so would it be for Howland Reed so that he could follow where they went? I don't even know if Howland Reed is still alive. For all we know. It's killing me about where Howland Reed is and why he's not there. And it seems, I guess the fact that he sent his the child of his one of his best friend, is fitting. It would be a little odd, I guess, if Howland Reed showed up and said, "I'm going to take you to the wall." Bran might be a little bit like, "What do you mean?" So it fits that he sent his children, but I think they're a little more representative of something else besides that, because a lot of things that Mira says and a lot of things that she does make me think of mothers and where these mothers are. And she also mentions, I think, isn't it her that mentions Ned's mother? I think it might be. I think, or maybe it's, I can't remember. There's something in there about.
Yeah, Bran
Ned's
mentions
mom.
it. Yeah, Bran mentions it to himself, and he says that old Nan said it was the Flints that are the reason that he is so fond of climbing and stuff like that. Yeah, so it was Bran to himself.
Yeah, that's what Nan was saying. So there you go. That's what I wanted to get to. Thank you, Steffi. With the climbing, is that I feel like it just hit me when I was rereading this that Bran climbs. That's Bran's thing, to climb, and then he's faced with fly. Do you want to learn how to fly? So it's almost like the high tower, how with every generation it gets higher and higher. And Bran's always looking so far that he says he can see so far into the north, anywhere he's looking, he can see really far. So it almost makes me feel like he's climbing to get, he knows he's got to be somewhere higher, somewhere where he can see everything. Quite understand where he needs to go, but he knows he's got to be high up so he can see. So he's climbing all the time. But really where he needs to get is to the Greenseer throne. That's where he sees everything. So I just found that a cool tie-in with the climbing.
Okay, when it comes to the boat over Howland's Head, obviously we know the Blackfish somehow escaped River Run. I'm assuming it's by that. But then you also have Jaime and Brienne also escape on a boat with, I believe his one of his cousins or whatever. Yeah. So
Cleos,
again, yeah. So you have these tie-ins to that, but I think the Blackfish is definitely a bet for the flipped over boat and escaping that way. I think that's the only way that the Blackfish could escape River Run when Jaime puts it to siege and everything like that. As it comes to privileges and Joffrey reigning or whoever reigning, I feel like it definitely ties into nowadays where people take for granted privileges. Like you're talking about people in other countries have to walk hours just to gather water, right? And it's kind of like this indicative thing that they're doing. Like, Bran, you have to get us food. You have to bring back a rabbit or something so we can eat, right? So again, this theme of privileges keeps coming up, and how you have to humble yourself and appreciate what you have, even though no matter how small it is. As for Howland following him, I don't think so. I agree with you. I think it's very doubtful that he would be following. But I do believe that there, like I said before, I believe I was on AU's channel. I do believe that the Green Men are kind of like bouncers or like officers of the old gods, and they show up. So maybe there is an officer that's kind of following them until they reach another officer. Like, you know how Cold Hands was following back, like he was always falling back to protect them against something. It's kind of like that, like in the Ravens, like are always stalking them and stuff like that. It's almost like they're being watched, but they don't want any, like Jojen doesn't want them to know that they are being watched. It's more like ignorance is bliss. Like you don't think you're in a dire need or a dire situation, but you are, right? So yeah. As I also noticed that Bran does recognize Mira a lot more, like her outfits and her figure. You're talking about this girl is, I think they said 16 at the beginning of the book. Bran is 9. The fact that he even tries to, I guess, tap that is pretty interesting. So I Bran is very mature for his age if he's looking at this girl. As for the climbing in the flints, for me it was when, okay, I'll just quote the part as well. It says, his father's mother had been a flint of the mountains. Old Nan once said it was her blood in him that made Bran such a fool for climbing before his fall. He had died years ago, before he was born, though even before his father had been born. Now, when I think of climbing, and I guess let's backtrack a little bit. Okay, I understand that the Flints are mountain clans, and obviously this is more shown when it comes to Stannis' troops and in the Winds of Winter, where Theon analyzes how they have special horses and snowshoes and all this climbing gear and stuff like that. So I can understand that it's a mountain that you need to climb and stuff. But for me, climbing is always indicative of wildlings, not of mundane people beyond, like, south of the wall, right? Like, you're talking about they climb, like, the wildlings climbed up a 700-foot wall, which is exactly what John is doing during this time. He's climbing a wall, right, to get to the other side. So it's very weird that it was tied to that and not the wildlings. But I guess when you think of like the Vale and how the mountain clans are technically considered wildlings by their standards, I guess the mountain clans are wildlings to the north, but less so, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it makes perfect sense. Because as I was reading this also, I kept getting the feeling of wildlings from mountain clans and just wildlings in general, you know, the way that they have to survive on this journey is the same way the wildlings survive in most ways. Might makes right, that kind of stuff. They're now living that way. So Bran, even though he's being called your, you know, Lord, still living like a wildling. Go to show you that the wildlings are just people and they're the same as anyone else. Even the Lord of Winterfell is on a journey, you know, having to kill a rabbit for dinner. So interesting, because the mountain clans, it makes me feel like there was something about Mance's name and the way that he's maybe possibly related to someone in the mountain clans because of his name. It made me think of Mance a lot, just because do follow someone who's strong, you know, does make right with the wildlings. So they will follow power. So it makes me feel like it's a journey. It's also a hero's journey for Bran. He's doing the climb. He's doing the climb to become the man he's going to be when he lets the wildlings through and starts making his own decisions, killing the boy. Bran is becoming the man the young man he needs to be in order to see what he needs to do. It's just that he's got these two guides that, yeah, he's distracted by Mira. How much different it would be if Mira weren't there, you know? And it also reminds him of his shortcomings so much, and the fact that he's crippled. And this is the first time he wargs Hodor, or his skin changes Hodor. So it's like a description of Bran sort of realizing what men go through in this world when they're not just safely in their castles, what Jon might be going through, what goes through, and how important Winterfell is. You know, there's even a part where right before, this is probably at the end of the Game of Thrones, I think, when they leave the crypts of Winterfell and Osha is in the Godswood, and it says you can see her face, but there's just leaves around her face. So it looks like she's a face inside of a tree, which is exactly the face of a god of a tree in Celtic mythology. They always have a green face with leaves for hair and stuff like that. So it made me think of trees and watchers, you know. So I'll jump quickly to the 79 Sentinels just to say that 79 is the atomic number of gold. So that really interests me, that, you know, all of this stuff, all of these journeys, all of these epic struggles make you better. You know, the point of it is that the more you go through, the better you are, the stronger you are. And so, and especially being a bastard, things like that, you're stronger because of it. So it's almost like, I mean, making the climb, you kind of makes you realize and humbles you enough to see who you might become.
Okay. I got it. I can pick up for a minute. Um, as to Mira, they would be starving without that young lady. She brings in the food, you know. And also in there, it says that Mira breathes mud. You know, I can see breathing with a lot, you know, a lot of things, but hills as far as we know, so she can't breathe in water. But mud is totally different, and it's muddy down here where I'm from, and I just don't see it. But maybe there's a trick to it. And they are being watched. You know, you got several, you got, like I said, Wex, and you've got the Hill clans. And as far as his great grandmother, I got the same feeling. I got the feeling that maybe she herself was the product of a wildling union, or because even the Hill clans themselves are kind of like wildlings. You know, they do still practice first rights and everything too. And also, there's something else I want to switch back around and go back to here a minute. And Bran, you know, when he senses where his brothers and sisters are, at least Arya and Jon, not so much Sansa because she has no wolf. He said that his sister had left the wilds to walk the halls of Man Rock where other hunters ruled. Once within those walls or halls, it was hard to find a path back out again. And that makes me think, you know, of Arya in the House of Black and White. Already seeing that she's going to be in the House of Black and White, and it is very hard because it was hunters. It was ruled over by other hunters. So that kind of lets me think of the House of Black and White and the Faceless Men. But Bran remembered he was the Wolf Prince. He was the Green Prince. And Jojen has to keep bringing him back to being Bran because he gets so involved and he gets so hungry at times. He wants to eat what the wolf eats. He fights the pack off to get to the deer, you know. And I guess he essentially becomes a leader. That may be the ones that follow him up at the north of the wall. But yeah, it's very interesting. And I do see a lot of wildlings in the mountain clans and the northern clans. That's it.
Yeah, I'll jump in really quick. That's sort of what I was wanting to say earlier, is that I was actually going to do a video on the Starks because I looked at the timeline, or the family tree in the World of Ice and Fire, and I couldn't believe it. It was like every single northern house they've married. So it really is all family, truly. So if it makes me feel like this is something that's telling us that the wildlings are they need to be part of the kingdom. You know, this is kind of a lead into Jon bringing them over the wall, or over through the gate, because they are men, and they're just the same as, like you said, they're just like, really. And it makes me feel like the Starks are more comfortable when they're in wildling territory. Like Jon really took to the wildlings, and they and Rickon both took to Asha really well. And they sort of think the same way. I mean, they believe in the same gods. They really have a similar way about them. So I think it's like they're reminding Bran of what they don't know, what the Starks are supposed to know, and they don't remember. You know, every time one of the Starks says something, like Bran says, "What is the comet about?" And Oshus kind of laughs, you know, like, "Oh, you know nothing." And Jon's always being told by Ygritte he knows nothing. So it's interesting that they are a lot more like wildlings. So it does make sense that they would be descended from a wildling. I've always thought their mother was. I'll let one of you go.
I think you guys pretty much nailed it. Like, even on Mance Raider, like, I have nothing to say on that. Like, I can't even add anything. You just knocked it out of the park. Nan, you hit the nail on the head. Way to a man's heart is through his stomach. So I can see why Bran loves Mira so much. But I wanted to bring up a quote, because I don't have anything to add, maybe just to continue the conversation and just add it into the mix. Mira says she hates and loves the mountains. Bran says it can't be both. And this is the quote. Why can't it be both? Because they're different, he insisted, like night and day, or ice and fire. If ice can burn, said Jojen in a solemn voice, then love and hate can mate. Mountains or marsh, it makes no matter. The land is one. One, his sister agreed. I just wanted to get your take on that quote.
I had that down too, Steffi, especially the part about if ice can burn, then love and hate, can mate. I think that was the term it said. If ice can burn, then love and hate can mate. So, yeah, I found that very interesting. And then, there is that old saying that fine line between love and hate. So, that's an older one that comes from here. So, yeah, that's a good idea. That's good thinking. I don't know what to think about it other than, yeah, that's just what it is.
Yeah, I had that quote written down too. I love that quote. It's beautiful because it does just go to say that, they are teaching Bran humility, whether they mean to or not. They are. And it's quite beautiful, really, how to them and how they teach him and how open Bran is to everything that he's being taught. Most young boys would be complaining or something of the kind. He sort of complains in his head a little bit, but not much, I think it's just an adventure, and this is the kind of thing he loves, and he's in his element. I feel like that's really what I got from this chapter from these chapters, is that he is finding his element, Jon's finding his element, and they're all finding their element with the wildlings. Arya probably would too. She just ended up in a different place. The only other thing really that I had is that Bran wondered once they meet Sam and Gilly, Bran wondered what Gilly would think if she ever saw Winterfell, because they're talking about castles again, just like Jon and Ygritte. And Jon says, I remember him saying to Ygritte something like, one day, and he promises her that she will. And then I think when she dies, he says, we're in the castle now, or something like that. And so it made me think of that, and it made me think that maybe Gilly will see Winterfell. That maybe Sam and Gilly will be maester and or something, you know, to Winterfell, but they'll be together, and it'll maybe change the way maesters are. Maybe Sam will change that with Gilly, or it'll just be different at Winterfell in the north. Maybe it'll split. Just the thought that came to my mind when I saw that. I thought Gilly has to see Winterfell then.
Okay, I'll jump in. Okay, the concept of the land is one for me. Like it's weird that they mark it as one, because like you're mentioning these different elements. If these are all one, then it's not separate, it's together, right? It's a combination of all of them, right? It's kind of like the Massey symbol and the spiral. It has all three, right? So there is no separation, right? So
right.
It's just it's
Yeah.
weird. But the next quote that that kind of got me on this train of thought of this oneness is, and I'll just quote it right now. The Greenseers were more than that. The abilities. They were worked as well as you are, and the greatest of them could wear the skins of any beast that flies or swims or crawls, and could look through the eyes of the werewoods as well, and see the truth that lies beneath the earth. So, again, if they are all one, then what really lies beneath this earth, right? You know what I mean? Like, if it is one, the werewood is one with the earth, then it kind of goes back to...
Can you hear me now?
Uh-oh,
Yes.
did we lose him? Yeah, we can hear you, sweetheart.
Yeah, you're good. So if there is something beneath the earth, then it kind of refers back to like Gendel and Gorn and these people that were these wildling people that have lived under the tunnels. Like, is that what this quote is referring to? Like these combination of quotes? Because they're very close together that this is mentioned. So, like, is it referring to that? Or is it referring to Bran's big dream in Game of Thrones where he sees the shy and something stirring beneath the shadows and stuff like that? Is that what he's talking about? He's talking about the 14 flames. Is he talking about the crypts of Winterfell? Like, if everything is one, then that is also means that, and it kind of goes with ice can burn. Then doesn't that mean the others are also one with them as well? Like, it's confusing. Like, where do you draw the line of oneness? Like, it's the problem I'm having, because if you're talking about, again, this brings in the Stark blood. If the Starks have blood everywhere, right? Like the possibility could be that they married a Bolton as well. You're talking about their enemies with the Boltons too. So where is that line of oneness? Like, where do you stop walking on that tightrope and go into these separate kingdoms, like, or these separate elements and all this stuff? You get what I'm saying? I feel like I'm ranting and it's not really helping.
I get it.
Okay.
And I think that actually I was looking at something, because in that cave, or in the night fort, they mentioned niter being on the walls a lot, and this kind of might go to the oneness. That made me think of niter. Where have I heard that before? And it's Edgar Allan Poe again. He seems to use a lot of Poe also, with the Raven and the Cast of Amontillado. And this is the Cast of Amontillado, where there is niter on the walls of a cavern that they're in. And the quote from the Cask of Amontillado is that the main character is, because of the niter, it's sort of like a spider web, and it hangs from the walls. So it's like the the main character is getting closer and closer to being ensnared in the web of the villain. So it made me think, is this the Night's King that is ensnaring Bran, is bringing him closer, or is it Bloodraven bringing him closer? Because, I mean, if George flipped it, then it could be that Bloodraven is the good character. He is on the side of the living, and he's not on the side of the Night's King. If George is staying with the same thing as Poe, the same theme as Poe was saying in the Cask of Amontillado, then it means that it's the Night's King calling him. If he flips it, also it could mean that Bloodraven's calling him, and that he's, you know, the one who's going to sort of give Bran to the Night's King, or give Bran over. That's not good. I just sort of am starting to lean towards the fact that he's not, that Bloodraven is on the side of the living, and that this might be the Night's King's web he's being ensnared in. I found the Nighter very interesting.
Cynthia, you want to jump in on that one? Cynthia. Okay, I'll go. Okay, so before you mentioned Sam and Gilly as well, I do believe Sam's going to end up ruling his house. I don't think his brother's going to last or anything. So I don't see that. But Gilly is probably, I think the show shows her very differently. They show her very educated, where she's kind of not. She's educated on Northern lore and educated in street smarts, but when it comes to education, it's just, there is no logic to her. But as for the spider web, I actually noted that down as well, and I said that like, I'm into paranormal shows, as you guys know. I'm always scared at night. But so the feeling of being in a ghost's presence.
We're having some weather channel.
Oh, it's okay, Cynthia.
Sorry, hon.
Man,
Go
she's
ahead.
in the rain.
Okay, so the feeling of a spider web on your face or on your body or something like that, it's supposed to mark a ghost's presence, like of it being near you, that sensation of like trying to get something off your face or your arm or your body. So I found that very interesting. And if it is a ghost, does that indicate another warg or like you? And also, when you think of the spider web, I also thought of the werewood net as well, and how it kind of weaves throughout Westeros, right, and throughout the world. Now, for who the spider is, I don't think it would be Brynden Rivers. I don't associate Night's King with Bloodraven. I think they're opposing sides. I believe when we were doing the Crypts of Winterfell, I actually left this out, but I do believe that there was some underground railroad for the Children of the Forest when the Andals came, and they all went to the Starks in order to travel through there to underground, like, and that's how Gendel and Gord got through as well. They dug a hole up, and then they led to Deep Lake or Long Lake, and so I believe there is an underground railroad, and they had to take that in order to get to the other side of the walls to be safe. Like, even though that's a worse option, being extinct is like the Andals could have wiped them out. So I think when it comes to, they could have warded themselves off against the others. I think that was a better option at the time, but slowly they're dying and everything like that due to trying to venture outside of that area, that is becoming a dire necessity to have someone protect them. But yeah, Cynthia, you got anything to say while you're with us?
Well, I was want to talk about the oneness, and thing you were talking about earlier, and that it goes back to, is this just the changing of the seasons? Is this a balancing of nature? Is this oneness? Is this the oneness that they're talking about? And if this is nature, is the are the White Walkers all a part of it, or did the children mess up the balance of nature when they created the White Walkers? By the show, they created the White Walkers so far, but I'm thinking that that's pretty much going to be the way it is in the books. What do you girls think?
I'll jump in. I don't know about that. I mean, I have a feeling it'll be something like that it'll be a ritual, but I don't think it'll be. I don't see it being an obsidian dagger part of a man. I just don't. I could be totally wrong. I really don't know. I just feel like there's something missing. There has to be a ritual of some kind. They're in a circle of stones. It has to fall at a certain time of year, has to fall at under a certain, when the stars are aligned in a certain way, when the planets are in a certain place, when it's a certain time of year. So I think it had a little bit more magic spells being woven into maybe just an evil humor. It could have gone in with the obsidian dagger, because that is what kills them. I just don't, there's just something, it feels like it's missing from that, and I don't know what it just feels like there's something missing. I don't know, Steffi, what do you think?
Actually, when I first started writing theories and stuff like that, TBAB and Justin wanted to hear my idea on how the others were created, the pact and stuff like that. It's taking forever to write, like it's been so long, but I guess I could release it like sort of now. I believe the pact was between the First Men and the Children of the Forest, but the free Children of the Forest. I believe a sect of the First Men wanted to keep them as slaves, and they did that. And in order to beat the First Men in this righteous union between the First Men and the Children of the Forest, they needed to force the Children of the Forest to make them stronger. And I think it severely backfired onto them. And that's where you get the others from. As for the dragon glass, I'm in agreement with Ashley. I highly doubt it has something to do with dragon glass. I think the dragon glass can only go so far, and I don't believe rituals are also enough to make that. I believe iron from ice, which is what Jay mentioned, is more likely the ironwood. I think that's what the Telltale Games was talking about. And yes, I have played that game numerous times. Actually, I've tried to do every single route in that game just to get more information. Yeah, so that's what I believe went down. So, yeah, I think it's just severely backfired, and they're kind of blaming the Children of the Forest for leading them down this venture when it was them who made the slaves. It's kind of like how the slavers in Astapor, when Danny takes over, they don't believe that the slaves will go against them, like kind of like the Unsullied, right? The Unsullied just stood there. They were like, no, we're going to follow freedom. Screw you, right? Like, it's kind of like that same sentiment, right? Where you want to choose freedom over that. But if you're a slave, you're going to do whatever you need to do. You're going to sell your soul, right? You're going to be abused just to survive another day. And that's what the Children of the Forest did. They did what they were told. Like, that sect of the Children of the Forest did what they were told in order to live another day. But it backfired. Yeah.
I love that That's such a great theory. It makes sense to me too, because right before we got on the air, I was saying to I had found something about, there's this passage where they talk about King Sherritt calling down his curse on the Andals of old. So was that Andals who are different from the Andals? The Andals of old makes me think it was Andals who came before the Andals themselves came. And if so, it fits in with the tribes that settled Ireland, and with the tribe, the Tuatha De Danann, who are like the children of the forest. They mist and get ships lost in the water, things like that. They can put evil humors out. Makes me wonder if the Andals came, fought with the children, and then went back out to sea. And first men came, warred with the children, and then the Andals came back. It makes me wonder, because the mythology of Ireland itself says that this group of people who were seafaring people did come back twice. I don't know if that Andals of old is referring to just the Andals or a different group of Andals. So that would go with your theory about, a faction of the children turned. And I that makes a lot more sense to me, because I just don't see, or I mean a faction of the men being turned from the children, because I don't see them all wanting to do that, to make an evil monster.
Yeah, that's my point. I have the quote here, and this is what sparked it. This is from Old Nan. It said, and this is about the wildlings, and it said, "Cruel men, slavers and slayers," which is of the first men and the children of the forest. You can't just pick one or the other. Thieves of the land, which refers to the last of the giants, the song that Ygritte sings and stuff. They consorted with giants and ghouls. Okay, the giants are probably from the Barrow Kings. The ghouls are probably from House Hightower, because there's a lot of ghosts and the mists around Mokaelin. Stole children in the dead of night, which is Bale the Bard, and drank blood from polished horns, which reminds me of Craster or House Goodbrother, which is on the Iron Islands. And you're talking about during a certain time that hold on, let me look at the name quickly. Who is it? Who am I thinking of? Right here. Edric Stark. He was called Snowbeard.
Right.
So again, like referencing that. So it kind of comes all together. Wildlings come over the wall or through the mountains to raid and steal off and carry women. If they catch you and make your skull into your cup and drink blood and stuff like that. So like it continues with this theme of where it kind of travels, this movement. Like to me, Grimm does a lot of migration, and you really notice it. Like that's where I would go. Like it's kind of like battle plans drawn out, and you notice that, and that's what sparked it, like that idea. But this also leads into what you were saying too, and I'd like to just read the quote, and it's about the Krennig men and stuff. Andals and Ironmen, Freys and other fools, all those proud warriors who set out to conquer Greywater, not one of them could find it. They ride it to the neck, but not back out. And sooner or later, they plunder into bogs and sink beneath the weight of all that steel and drown in their armor. So again, like this trying to get north, right? Like it's almost like when you think about like Mokaelin in that area, like if supposedly Mokaelin was so formidable from when you're trying to march from the south to the north. But what about north to south? Right, you're talking about the destruction of that building alone. It's strong enough to hold from south to north. But what about north to south, right? So again, that's the
Right.
reference of that, the first men and the children of the forest and that Underground Railroad and all that stuff, right? And the protection of that. And then the other way, which would be the Andals way. Now, I do find it interesting that the children of the forest tried to flood Mokalan the same way they did the Arm of Dorne, which means Greywater Watch was not always a marsh, which is, again, not speaking to the oneness, because it wasn't one to begin with. It was made to be one. If it, again, referring to the kings of, like, the kings of winter and the Marsh King and the conquering of that land. So again, this north to south, and that's where it stopped. This also reminds me of the Fisher Queens, which is in Essos, and basically it's the same thing. It's this palace that floats, right? And the three women there are supposed to be so wise that people would venture to them to gain this absolute knowledge. Again, referring to Howland having this absolute knowledge, right? This Knight of the Laughing Tree having this absolute knowledge and power and to do everything, to make his castle float and move and where no ravens could find it. And then you got he basically wed three daughters, which is like the offspring Hazor. I probably butchered that name so badly, but he married basically into three other families, which is again referring to the Starks and how they married into the Barrow Kings, right? They married into the Marsh Kings. And then they took the hostages of the Boltons at the end. So again, and the War King. So you're talking about all these houses, right? Or all these great kings supposedly are into that. So yeah, and then you have the hairy men and the tall men again associating with the Andals and the overtaking of Westeros. So it was definitely that.
Yeah. Yeah, the Mad Axe too was an Andal, right?
Also, you've got the Ironborn chair, the chair on the Ironborn's throne. Who made the chair? Who made the throne? You
The
know,
sea
not
stone chair.
bones. Stone chair.
Yeah,
That could possibly be some of the first Andals you're talking about, and go right on along with what you were saying too, Steffi.
yep. Yeah, I love that, Nan. I love that tie-in. It's great. You know, I was just thinking while you guys were talking that the oneness, maybe the oneness is just the oneness of consciousness of the earth, of any planet, like our planet. I always look at the human race as like we're all a big web. Because when an idea starts, somebody else will get the idea. So it's obvious that we're connected. There's more times in these books telling you that we're connected than we're separate, right? So it's the theme, you know, that we have to come together to stop the long night. We have to come together to sing the song. We have to come together to fight. So it makes me think maybe the spider web is just the web of consciousness, and that's the threat of the Night's King, is losing that place in the web. Then you're just lost. You're just kind of in free fall, in nothingness.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it when you think about the Dance of the Dragons and how Bran thinks that men would be wroth, right, if their land was stolen from, right? So yeah, I can understand that, where he wants to be one, but he can't anymore. He can't redeem himself anymore. Yeah, that's sad. Paint the picture like that.
It's really sad. I always think about that quote with Bran saying men would be wroth, because it breaks my heart. That's that whole speech of Leaf saying this is our long dwindling, and you know, we're dying. And yeah, I think it's Maybe it's Bran realizing that he's growing up and that I mean, it definitely says that Bran is becoming aware that he's more responsible than he thinks for a lot of people, especially as Lord of Winterfell. Whether people think he's dead or not, he's still a Stark. He is alive, and so he does have that purpose. Even if he's not going back to Winterfell, now he's a three-eyed raven, so it's almost like he's learning it in both ways, you know. He's learning how to be a humble man who's also a lord, and he's also learning humility before he becomes the ultimate greenseer. Just what you need if you're the last greenseer, you do need immense empathy for the world. So yeah, the oneness is really important.
Cynthia, you got anything to add?
There was one thing, I don't know whether or not I mentioned it because I was cutting that in and out there for a little bit. I wanted to go back to the rings of the trees, and what you were saying, Steffi, and the rings of the trees could be the markings of the lifetime of each different green seer. Is that kind of what you were saying?
Hold on, repeat that again.
Because I like that. The circles in the tree, like we have in our trees, we have circles that mark the years of a tree, how long a tree has lived. And in the circles of a werewood, could that possibly be the circles being the lifespan of a green seer?
Yeah,
the way ours.
Yeah, I agree with that. I
for
think that's
years.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. Like when Bran starts that little sapling, I think that's indicative to how long he's going to be a green seer for, and then it just stops. Right? Like I don't. Yeah. So yeah, my answer is yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that was all.
Yeah. It's such a cool thought. You know,
okay.
The trees are just so. Go ahead, Steph, please.
No, continue, Ashley. Sorry for interrupting.
I'm going to say how, you know, in ancient times, people always were thought of as trees. People were thought of themselves as coming from trees and as trees. So it goes to all of these trees being mentioned in this one book. It brings it all together with the oneness. Like, we are all one, but we're separated in all these different ways because of all these different wars. Men would be Roth. That's really the line. Men would be Roth. The children wouldn't. They just say, this is our long dwindling. Our time is over. Which probably is what, you know, men should be thinking. Or, you know, maybe that's the humility that needs to come to the men of Westeros, is that, you know, we're not immortal. We're not going to live forever. We're not invincible. So we have to treat each other well. And it's almost like, to me, it seems like the others are a barometer of that, how men are treating each other. And, you know, just not that only is what brings the others, but seems like when men start to behave in terrible ways, the others start to come. So I just feel like it's really tied in with the behavior of men.
I agree with that, Ashley. You know, that goes back to my Pact of Ice and Fire. When they use blood magic, it seems like every time they use blood magic, there are also bad consequences every time it's used, or anything that's like that. Steffi, you want to go on with when they get to they're finally about to get to the wall, I think. We've covered their passage pretty good. Um, we got this tumble down tower, and they've already met the little, and we've talked about that. So let's let you go on from there, hon.
Okay, so we got Bran working Hodor for the first time. I thought that was pretty interesting because Hodor's instinct was to grab the sword, and it doesn't let him, which is weird. If he's such a humble giant, and such a gentle giant, you would think that if the sword makes him less scared, that he would have allowed him to grab it.
I think that's very interesting that you brought that up, because the swords was one of the things I had in my notes, Steffi. And it's the choice he had. You know, Bran, he claimed his Uncle Brandon's. And Mira claimed Lord Rickon, Brandon's grandfather. But Hodor, he got a much older, a heavy piece of iron is what he got. And that had been dulled from centuries of neglect, and it was well spotted with rust. And that kind of goes back into the iron being the more important to in the war against the others than we thought to begin with. They've not mentioned it much in the show, but it is mentioned in the books. And that was it. Going on up, you know, he wargs Hodor, and it's the first time. And you know, he does this because it's of a necessity, and he does it without realizing it. And then I noticed one thing, that when his warging things, even when he sees that eagle out there, and he tries his best to warg and fly into that eagle, but he doesn't make it. The eagle flies away, and I kept wondering myself, is that Orl's eagle, that he's possibly getting close enough to the wall that they've started spotting one of the wildlings' warg eagles as well? I had thrown that. Let you go, Steffi.
I'm trying to find the quote, but yeah, during this like battle and stuff like that, it's Bran doesn't really describe it in that moment. He describes it out of that moment, right? And this is when he realized also that Rob's dead as well, right? Saying that there's only 4 left now, and one's quiet, which is Ghost. Hold on. I'm trying to find it. Maybe it was earlier. It basically says that I can't find it. That when Bran ends up trying to warg back into summer after this battle takes place, he can't. He refers to it as being like touching a hot kettle. Your hand is instantly to pull away and to protect yourself. So I'm wondering if this is a reference to Lightbringer, and like it's and instead of the dragon glass necessarily killing the other, this blade is supposed to make the Night's King warg out of these bodies that are being possessed at that time, like whether they're dead or not, right? Like it's almost giving them peace, if that makes sense. Like it's sending them back. That's one of the main quotes that like I got from there, and I found that very interesting.
Sorry, guys, I was muted for a second. Go ahead, Nan. I'll go after you.
I was muted as well. Go ahead, Ashley.
That's okay. I was I could barely hear you when I was away, but what I did hear was you talking about Hodor being warged and the other thing you were I'm sorry, I was gone for just 2 seconds and I missed the last thing you said.
Here, I have the quote, so I'll quote it. Bran had reached out for Summer time and time again, but the pain he found drove him back. The way a red-hot kettle makes you pull your hand back, even when you mean to grab it. Like, the battle's not really talked about in that moment, like, of what Summer did. He's, like, later Bran mentions it, saying that he killed 3 people, right? And he injured Summer's leg during this battle and stuff like that. So I'm just wondering if that's a reference to Lightbringer, and if this, you know how the dragon glass kills it, and it, like the other, and it kind of makes it wither away, or the white and the Valyrian sword in the show, we don't know that for certain, or the fire in the books, but I'm wondering if the sword Lightbringer, or this mystical sword, if it has the properties of a red hot kettle to force the warg person, or the Night's King, to get him out of these bodies. Like, is it a kind of like the hot kettle reference? Is it enough to make him recede back instead of killing all these people through fire, or through dragon glass, or through the Valyrian sword? Is it enough to save those people within the bodies themselves? Like, is that what the Lightbringer is? Because it's supposed to be this powerful, like, red hot energy, right? It's supposed to produce its own heat. So you wonder if just the heat of the blade enough is able to send him back, like the red hot kettle.
Yeah.
Steffi, you saying that maybe that Bran can warg into the dead, that in order to keep the Night's King from taking over, maybe it stop at some point to keep them from warging anybody else? Or are you talking about the ones that are whites, the white walkers versus the whites? There, which one are you talking about?
No, I'm not saying if Bran can get the warg out of the person. Like, it's kind of like when Bran's in the Raven and he senses someone else is there. I'm wondering if the sword Lightbringer, like the mystical sword, like the red hot kettle that produces its own heat, is enough to get the person who is in the Raven, right, when Bran's in the Raven, to send it away, right, to like make him jump out of it, freeing that whoever that individual is, whether it is a white or a person who is warged, or if it's another, and it's freeing them from that element of Night's King controlling them.
I see what you're talking about. Good point.
Oh, I love that. That's really a cool thought, because really, if you can change one, you have, it would seem that if it's done with magic, you could be able to take the magic away and bring them back to life. It would sort of make sense. That's another balance. It's a really interesting thought. I like that. I wanted to talk about the rust too. I found that really interesting because it's everywhere, especially in the tower. And the gold on that tower interested me too, that they painted it gold when good Queen Alysanne came and spent the night there. They painted it gold and put a crown on it, I think, or painted the crenellations gold so it looked like a crown. That made me think, oh, that's really cool, because the gold, as you get further up to the wall, it seems like your consciousness gets clearer, and Sarah, John, all kinds of people feel better at the wall. Bran, Osha, lots of people feel like they're better or stronger when they're near the wall. So when when they're in the fort and they're trying to open the gates, and Hodor's rustling, he's rattling them all and trying to open them, and they're all locked. And it says there's rust, pieces of rust flying around in the air from the rattling because the iron's rusting. So it reminded me of the iron swords rusting on the king's laps in the crypts. Is it maybe that enough time has gone by that the iron that's keeping the spirits and the magic contained, maybe like people inside bodies or people trapped, trapped in the underworld or under the sea, let's say, wherever they are, if they're trapped or spirits are trapped, if the iron's rusting, all of these gates, it makes me think of the hinges of the world too, because the hinges did scream when they opened the door to the tower, or to the tower. The hinges scream, just like Damphair hears in his head when he sees Euron. So it's like there's another hinge, maybe it's the Night Fort that's the hinge. And so when Bran gets to the Night Fort, he is on top of Hodor's shoulders and he pulls the gate down, and it comes flying down, and all this rust rains down on him. So it's like, it's reddish brown. So it's sort of like the red fork, the red blood of the Targaryens, of the Valyrian line. It seems to be magic of dragons and, fire. So maybe the magic is being let out also because of the rusting. And if it's rusting, it might be because in alchemy, a reddish brown powder is a really good sign of the fact that you're doing the process correctly. So when you get to the reddish brown powder, it's a pivotal point in the alchemical process. So it seems like when this rust is raining down, it's saying you're on the right track. You're going the right way. And it's also saying, he can hear rats scurrying around. He says he thinks it's the Rat King's sons running from their father. There are definitely spirits everywhere. Just because the iron rusted, iron does keep spirits in. And so does salt. And it made me think of Sansa wearing that necklace that's the symbol for salt, that's a circle with a line through it. That and sulfur are they're the two elements that start alchemy, the alchemical process. They bring body, mind, and spirit together. Mercury, salt, and sulfur. And sulfur is supposed to be like the ultimate, the male ingredient. The salt is the female. And the every step gets mercury. So the end result is gold. So is this saying that when the iron gets to a gold state, when it gets to its purest state, then these spirits will be set free, or the veil will be put back into place, the balance will be back into the world? Do you make sense?
Yeah, okay, so I'm just gonna do a little synopsis of what I gather. You basically think that that there's a good omen when it comes to rust, and that the rust doesn't necessarily mean that a soul is technically trapped, but it's trying to help whoever is associated with that rust, and that that the rust could mean. I wrote this down. The Targaryens and Blackfires, the sigils and the rusting. The problem with I have with the good omen part for me. Am I right?
Yeah, I didn't think it was a good omen.
You didn't think it was a good. Okay, because I was wondering. Yeah. Okay, so it's not a good omen for it to be rusting away. Okay. Now, then my thought.
What I'm. It's okay.
No, you can go.
I just meant that if the iron's rusting, then there's nothing to keep the spirit in, whether it's good or evil. You know?
The ghosts are loose.
Right.
Yeah, okay, that was my thought, because if the weird thing about the Queen's crown is that that it was abandoned. Like, I find it weird that you, like, Queen Alicent didn't live, like, that long ago. Let's say, like, 150 years. Let's just ballpark it, right? And why would you abandon a tower that you just restored to honor this queen? It seems really weird, right? And if rusting is supposed to trap spirits or trap someone in there, also, you're talking about the way to go into this place. It's through little, like, a hidden, like, pathway of water, right, of shallow water. It just seems weird that it was abandoned, right? And these things were rusted on top of that. And then all of a sudden, all this stuff happens, and then you have Hodor grabbing for a rusted sword on top of that, right? Who we don't really know who it belongs to, aside from the fact that it's probably older than the one that Mira and Jojen have, or the one Rickon has, or Osha. So it's just weird. Like, it was just like a reaction, and then like an equal and opposite reaction to that omen, right?
Yeah.
So I'm on the same page as you. So there's something fishy going on there, and where are these people that were once there, and why did they abandon it? Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And the other part is the causeway, is that, like, Bran knows it's there because old Nan told him it was there. But Jojen's like, how do you know this is here? I don't know how you would know this is here. How would you know it's under the water? Told him. And then he remembers that Ned and Maester Luwin would say, oh, don't just take her stories with a grain of salt. They're meant to scare you. But her stories are all, and they're perfectly true. So it seems like Underground Railroad to Winterfell is kind of the same idea as this causeway. So maybe it's the same kind of idea as the Kings of Winter with the swords on their laps. Something rusted and let the spirits out, and the people had to flee because they found it really odd that the town was so nice and so peaceful and empty. It was, nobody was there. So it's kind of the same kind of thing. Like, if there's danger, where did people go? And most of the time they go to Winterfell. Would they go? They probably wouldn't go to Winterfell up there. Maybe they would go to one of these castles, but as it is now, the castles are haunted. It seems all of them are empty. So castle, it would seem that all of them might be the same way, and that's why they're all closed up.
I just want to say to one thing is that the Night's Watch went downhill real fast because Queen Alicent, like you said, was like 150 years ago. and old Nan knows where these causeways and all were. I want to know how old Nan knows. And I mean, she's really old, but that they went down, the Night's Watch did go downhill fast, because in less than, say, 150 years, like you said, Steffi, the Night's Watch went to having 3 forts left now. Was it 3 that they have at the start of Game of Thrones? John is in the process of opening the forts back up. He wants to have all the forts manned before winter, which I doubt he's going to do it, because it sounds like winter's right around the corner or there. But yeah, where did they go? Did they just die off? If they did, were they never replenished? And why wasn't it not replenished? Was it the people in power? Kings, the Iron Throne? Changes in the Iron Throne? Did it go down like since Robert? Or were they still being reinforced because you still, you had Bloodraven went to the Wall right around that time, wasn't it? 100 or so years ago? Or he's 100 and something years old. Yeah. So,
yeah,
I mean, where did all these...
20.
Yeah. He would have lived during the time and seen the Night's Watch at, when it was manned fully. Well, it's not manned fully no more. And Bran and them come to a deserted, haunted castle. They're at a place of fear, that old Nan has instilled fear into their minds, his mind, since he was a child about this place. And he goes into the Night's Fort thinking of the Rat Cook and the many, many other stories and things that have happened there, and then they're met by Sam and Gilly. And that scared them to death once they finally did get in there. So I'm sure you other girls got other things to tell, but yeah, where did they go? What happened to the Night's Watch? Everything's gone.
So okay, great question.
I'd like to jump in quickly. Yeah, I do believe that it, like, now thinking about it, I agree with Ashley. There does need to be, like, it can't just be the rust on the grave itself that means something. There has to be rust that wards off the spirit if the rust gives way. You understand what I'm saying? Like, so if one barrier is broken, there has to be another barrier, right? But like, because of the how fragile iron is, it breaks away, which is going to accumulate and like basically give a cause to something happening. Whether I really hope that George R. R. Martin does discuss this later on and everything like that. But yeah, I believe with Ashley now what you're saying. I think it makes sense.
I like the rust raining down effect. Go ahead, Nan.
Well, that goes back to the same thing we were talking about, the crypts of Winterfell and the rust on the swords there. The same effect of the possibly the kings of winter being, the ghosts of the kings of winter being brought back, since the iron is rusting on their laps. The swords are rusting on their laps. It's the same kind of principle with the Night's Fort, I would figure, wouldn't you, girls?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, do you want to say something, Steph?
I thought we would move on a little bit. Let's go to the Night Fort, because we are reaching close. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I gotta get up early in the morning, so I wanted to get to the Night Fort as quickly as possible. So the first quote that I found very interesting was, "It is the Night Fort, and this is the end of the world." Now, when Bran has his big dream in the Game of Thrones, he said, "And he looked past the wall, past endless forests cloaked in snow, past the frozen shore and the great blue-white rivers of ice, and the dead plains where nothing grew or lived. North and north you looked, to the curtain of light at the end of the world. Now, if this is, and then again in chapter 4, Jojen says this, it was the end of the world, or Bran says it again, it was the end of the world, old man always said. On the other side were monsters and giants and ghouls, but they couldn't pass as long as the wall stood strong. Now, when Bran referenced the end of the world being the night fort, it's weird, but then Old Man references the wall being the end of the world. Now, if this curtain of light is supposed to be the end of the world in his dream, I find it weird that he's talking about, it's almost like he's referencing it from the south in hitting the wall and not the north in hitting the wall. Like it's almost like when he's saying a forest cloaked in snow, that could be in the north and not just the south. And then you're talking about the frozen shore, he could be talking about Hardhome, right? And the water's freezing around there, right? And the plains that where nothing grew or lived, he could be talking about the Frostfangs and the burial grounds where the wildlings go to try to find the Horn of Jormungand. Like, it's almost like he's not just talking about the south going north, he's talking about the north going south to the wall, which is the end of the world, which is where the light is. I just found that weird that all these people think the end of the world is where the wall is.
Right.
You get what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
It's just weird.
It's weird.
Yeah, and that goes back to what you were saying, Ashley, that Melisandre said that the wall is the hinge of the earth. So is that the hinge making it like, they did in old, they thought if you sail west, you'll go over the edge of the earth. So, I like the references. The wall may possibly being the world there.
Yeah. It's interesting because that's what I always think of, is that we're in the Middle Ages, basically. So that's when they believed the earth was flat. Maybe what's west of Westeros is Yeti, but I mean, the top of the Lands of Always Winter would have to connect to the other side as well. So it can end even at the Lands of Always Winter. I was actually listening to a really cool stream that A.U. Packmule did with Maester Payne and Callum, and they were talking about the Always Winter and whether it's actually maybe just our imagination. George is leaving it up to our imagination, saying the Lands of Always Winter, but you'll never see it. So it's left up to us to just visualize what that is. It might just be what they were saying was kind of cool, because they were saying it's like a Viking sort of thing where they say, Iceland is named Iceland, but it's green, and Greenland is named Greenland, but it's ice. So they're, was that once a beautiful green place where people wanted to live and then came south. So yeah, I find that really interesting about where does the world end and where's the other hinge? Is it the 5 forts because it's the other side, or is it a lot of hinges? She says it's one of the hinges of the world. So that implies there's 2. Maybe there's more than 2. I always took it to mean that there was 2, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I also got the Greenland Iceland thing too when I was thinking about that, and I think the show displayed that really well, actually, on how it was this basically this utopia almost before. Like, it was beautiful when they showed that that wide angle view of the land. It was so nice. Like, it was basically an oasis. It was kind of, for me, it kind of was like in Narnia, where like when the queen rules, right? And then when Aslan rules, it's like an oasis kind of thing. So it's almost like that recoming of the Dream of Spring, right? Yeah, that's what I got from it. But yeah, I agree.
I love that. I love Narnia so much. It does make me think of that too. It is a utopia. I mean, you know, the children are just kind of like, it's like a playground. It's beautiful. So yeah, I mean, the this is another thing about well, I guess we're in the night fort. So what I wanted to know is that we've got a few things here that Bran lists off. First, I wrote, this is when he skin changes into Hodor. And I had a thought about that maybe, you know, Hodor picks up the oldest sword. He playing Hodor almost more insistently on his way up, you know. They keep noticing that Hodor's kind of, he's even looking at different, like when they're looking at Cold Hands to see who it is, you know, and Hodor's looking another way and he's going, Hodor, and he's looking a totally other way. Maybe Hodor actually knows where he's going, you know, maybe he knows exactly what's going on. And he's actually, instead of Bran taking over his body in such an evil way, you know, because he feels vomit come up in Hodor's throat and stuff like that when he first skin changes into him. But maybe it's just the uncomfortability of it, and not so much that it's an evil thing, because Hodor does trust him completely. So maybe it's that Hodor, or if Hodor actually just kind of had given himself up to the fact that I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to be able to do something really gallant. You know, I can't be a knight, I can't fight, but I can do this. I can hold the door.
Yeah,
maybe,
I noted that too, that and I've always said this, that like Hodor does know what he is doing. Like he does have this, he does acknowledge where he's going and who he's going with, and like he does have free will. Like he may be like unable to speak, right? And that's all he says is hold the door or Hodor. But it's almost like in the show more. I don't think they do it in the books. Yeah, they don't do it in the books. But Crunk, he's always hitting the ants or whatever, right? Tyrion explains it, like his half-wit cousin. To Tyrion, he has no idea. Yeah, he has no idea what he's doing. But to Crunk, or whatever this guy's name is, right? He knows.
Right.
So,
right.
Like you can't just assume just because these unfortunate things have happened to Hodor that he doesn't know what he's doing. He does have free will. He does have a mind behind that. So yeah, I noted that too.
Yeah. And one other thing I noted in this book too was when Jojen was, Bran was talking to Jojen about Hodor, and told him that his name was really Walder. And then Jojen tells Bran that he thinks Hodor likes to hear you. He likes to hear you call him his name, and I think he was referring to him calling him Walder. Was an interesting observation that I found as well. Yeah.
Yeah. It's odd because that's a Frey name. You know, and it's so odd that, but it also felt like
Walder is every it seems. That old man got around.
Every Frey's name. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how Hodor got that name, but well, I guess I don't know, but what was I gonna say? That Hodor, I lost my train of thought. Anyway, I'll just go on with the next thing that Bran thought, which is that the Night's King reigned before his memory was wiped, before his from memory, his life was wiped from the memory of man. It's where the 79 sentinels stood their watch. It's where the rat cook served the Andal King his prince and bacon pie. It's where brave Danny Flint had been raped and murdered. It's where King Sherritt called down his curse on the Andals of old. The boys had faced the thing that came in the night. Mad Axe had climbed these towers and walked these yards, butchering his brothers in the dark. Blind Simeon Star Eyes saw the Hellhounds fighting. And I just have a little quote at the end that Benjen says, "We left the Night Fort 200 years ago." So 200 years ago was during the Targaryen reign. I don't know why they would have left the Night Fort 200 years ago.
I have an answer to that. Okay, so when Queen Alysanne and Jaehaerys Targaryen ruled, Jaehaerys Targaryen went north, right? He went to talk to the Stark at the time, and Queen Alysanne took the way up on Silver Wing to Queen's Crown, and then she went to the Wall, and then she gave the gift, but because of how ruinous the Night Fort was, basically she said, why don't we give you another area and you can build that better and smaller, because you're talking about the Night's Watch was dwindling down in power, that it didn't have enough resources. You're also talking about the stairs alone at the Night Fort were made out of stone. They were actually carved. They were also, it was actually the wall itself. It was ice steps going up. So she gave her jewels in order for them to make another one. So it was just kind of a give and take. But
yeah, I totally slipped my mind that it was her.
It was economics, more or less.
Yeah. Yeah. She gave the new gift, but because the Night's Watch were so good, that's why she gave the new gift. So they went bad not long after that. The other part that I wrote down about what Bran observes in the Night Fort is that he doesn't like the noises. The rats, the wind whistling nervously. That's kind of a cool way that I've never seen it written. The wind whistling nervously. It only whistles nervously at the Night Fort. I've never seen it written like that, unless I've missed it. Keeps groaning and settling. He thinks the rats are the children running from their father, the Andal King. The yard had spindly trees growing where the stables had been. Patches of old snow, and a weirwood twisted and white pushing up through the dome of the old kitchen. And summer's very uneasy. So it seems like it was a place with a lot of activity going on, and that it was just abandoned. And then there's such horrifying memories in there. It's like Steffi, watching paranormal shows at night. It's like that. You just, there's too much in there to even deal with. It's like, just shut it down. It's too much. Brave Danny Flint is enough, really. And then there's all these other things. The Hellhounds, the Mad Axe, the thing that came in the night. It's a lot of stuff in one place. And with the stairs, I was thinking about Sam going, there's so many stairs. Just cracks me up. Sam huffing and puffing. I love it.
Brave Danny Flint. That's the one that was a woman, wasn't it?
Yeah, and she dressed up as a
Yeah.
boy, and yeah,
See,
that's a
She
sorry.
go ahead. She got found out. Go ahead, there, Steffi.
Okay, I actually wanted to jump back a little bit to Hodor.
no. Please do.
Okay, so the Night of the Laughing Tree is revealed during this book, and it takes place at the Went, which is in Harrenhal. Now, Walter Went was the name of the person who held the tourney. So, if Old Nan is old when um, Ned and Lyanna and Benjen and Brandon were kids, supposedly Hodor is Old Nan is the great grandmother of Hodor. So that means her daughter, if her daughter went to this tourney, it would make and got knocked up by one of the Wents, the four brothers there. It would make sense that his name is a Went. I'm
Right.
just tinfoiling right now. It would make sense if she got knocked up and then had a kid and named it Walter after Walter Went.
I love that, Steffi. That's so cool. Because
I like that a lot better than Walter Frey. That's all I got to say. Thank you for that, Steffi.
So do I. You know, it's noticeable during this whole all the Bran chapters. I'm Old Nan is mentioned, and her stories are mentioned, that Hodor gets happier every time her name is said. So you can tell there's a connection there.
Yeah, exactly. So,
But Walter Went.
As for the stories of the Night Fort, okay, let's jump into Danny Flint. Again, I found it really weird that a girl would try to join the Night's Watch. I think procreation is pretty important on a girl's to-do list, especially in medieval times. You get knocked up young, you produce. That was basic, like just like it says in the book multiple times. Women's wars are in the birthing bed, right? Like, so it seems weird that Danny Flint, out of all these characters, would end up going to the wall. On top of that, again, you have this association with the Flints and them being able to climb. For me, it kind of seems like she was a wildling. I don't think she was particularly of that association. I think she maybe was a Flint beyond the wall. And then she got kidnapped, and that was that. Because you got to think, if the wildlings do climb, you have to associate them with the Flints as well, if those two things correlate. So it could have been just the raping of a wildling, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and also it ties into the Stark princesses and the Stark princes being taken hostage. Like, you know, they're always talking about how wildlings come down and steal women. So, and Old Nan does say the Night's King could be a Flint, an Ori, you know, all of those things. And all of those names are names that the Starks have married. So, yeah, it does. It seems like it makes a connection between the Mountain Clans, Old Nan, and Hodor, and the Starks. Yeah. Say anything more about that
I
before?
did, but I forgot it. Go ahead.
You got it. What do you want to talk about? Do you want to talk about the 79 Sentinels next, or the Night's King?
We could talk about the 79 Sentinels. I would be okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah, the 79 Sentinels are interesting. To me, the 79 Sentinels, I mean, it just so obviously ties into the trees, you know, and the fact that by the time we get to A Dance with Dragons, even in A Storm of Swords, when Jaime and Brienne are escaping from Riverrun, you've got the sentinels watching, and Jamie keeps saying there's sentinels. Sentinel pines are everywhere on the Red Fork, at least in the little loop where they are at the bottom of the 3 tributaries. So seemed like it seemed like when the sentinels were put there, they were rise wells, right? So that's Lady Dustin's line. And that really interests me because their father went up himself with them. So I wonder if that's part of Lady Dustin's story, you know, how her brothers or her ancestors are in the wall watching, like they're the, and that makes her feel like she's either got a little bit more power, or it makes her powerful because they were caught and brought back and buried in the ice. So, but it does, for me, it ties into her and why maybe that family is so, you know, why they've got a flaming red mane. It's kissed by fire, the horse on their sigil, you know, and her interest in the crypts and the North altogether. I mean, she's the widow of Barrowton, so that's a lot of magic right there. And the fact that the atomic number for gold is 79. It's almost like it's the pinnacle.
Yeah, I found it really. I'm getting an echo.
I'll shut off mine.
Okay, so when Ion pointed this out, 7 equals Faith of the Seven, and 9 equals the 9 werewolves John and Sam made their vows to the Night's Watch. That's interesting, but I don't think the time is in accordance to the Faith of the Seven. It's out of that Andal era in A Song of Ice and Fire. It would be more associated with the more so the Dawn Age and stuff like that. So it's a little further back. Yeah, I also found that the Risewells do get brought up a lot, especially the sigil. Like you're talking about, Lady Dustin sends her husband with a red horse into Robert's rebellion. It's the last parting gift, which kind of mimics Dany and Drogo getting the same thing to Dany, and then you have the stallion that mounts the world. Like there's so many mentions of this this horse. Now whether it's gonna pan out and something's gonna become of it, I don't know. But as for the Risewells themselves, I do find it weird that Lady Dustin does have this fondness for the Starks and this, but when it comes to the crypts and the ghouls, you're also talking about the Barrow Kings were also associated with graves, and that's why the Great Barrow and all that stuff. And it's weird that this also takes place at the Night Fort, which again is in reference to the Queen's corpse, and which is supposed to be a daughter of the Barrow King. So yeah, it's definitely interesting, but I do find it suspicious that if the 79 deserters left and then he sentenced them back, was it the Stark King who did the execution and went north with them to do it, or was it just the Risewell Lord who did it, or the Petty King, or it doesn't really mention it, but I think it's a Lord. So yeah.
No, it
Yeah, but
doesn't.
wasn't it the Night's Watch? I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. It's fine.
Wasn't it the Night's Watch that sentenced them to be in the frozen in the wall?
To be put into the ice?
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. I think it was. But the father, they went home and the father brought them back. And then he either guilty or just wanted to be with his sons and went up and had himself put there with them so that he could be with his sons forever.
But was he a deserter? Was he a deserter? Or, I mean, what I'm saying, is he one of the 79? Would he have been included in the 79? Or was he the 80th?
He'd be the 79th, I think.
He broke no laws.
Right. But he wanted to be buried with them.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I guess, yeah, I always took it that it was 79 with him, but I could be wrong.
Or maybe he went home and lived, and when he died, they sent him to the wall to be encased in ice. I don't know.
Okay, I'll jump in. Okay, so there was 79 deserters of the Night's Watch, which is the 79 Sentinels. Now,
Right.
the Lord Risewell, when he was dying, wanted to be with his son, who he basically condemned to death, and felt that he should watch with him forever, to basically make it up to him, to have some sort of redemption. So, just clearing that up.
Yeah, but he would have made the 80th watcher then. When he died, he would have been there with them as a watcher, a permanent watcher with his son. So yeah, you have 79 deserters, and then the father.
Correct.
This I've found an interesting quote that has to do with the 79 Sentinels that I just wanted to mention because it's interesting. It's from John's chapter, actually, in Storm of Swords. It says Eric's four remained well behind. The face where they were climbing looked smoothed and unpitted, covered with a smelt, that glistened wetly where the sun brushed it. Grigg's section was darker to the eye, with more obvious features, long horizontal ledges where a block had been imperfectly positioned atop the block below, cracks and crevices, even chimneys along vertical joints, where wind and water had eaten holes large enough for a man to hide in. So there's holes in the ice big enough for a man to hide in. And then the quote about the 79 Sentinels, Bran says, "There are ghosts here," Bran said. Hodor had heard all the stories before, but Jojen might not have. Old ghosts from before the old king, even before Aegon the dragon. 79 deserters who went south to be outlaws. One was Lord Risewell's youngest son, so when they reached the Barrowlands, they sought shelter at his castle, but Lord Risewell took them captive and returned them to the Night Fort. The Lord Commander had holes hewn in the top of the wall, and he put the deserters in them and sealed them up alive in the ice. They have spears and horns, and they all face north. The 79 Sentinels, they're called. They left their posts in life, so in death their watch goes on forever. Years later, when Lord Risewell was old and dying, he had himself carried to the Night Fort so he could take the black and stand beside his son. He'd send him back to the wall for honor's sake, but loved him still, so he came to share his watch. So, looks like he was one of the 70. Well, yeah, one of the 79 because he dug 79 holes. Murders. Maybe they did make an 80th one for Lord Risewell.
Well, they had to have, I would think, from what you just said, it sounded to me like they did. I mean, you
Yeah,
got the
those are big.
79 deserters, so then he would have been the 80th, I would think, once he died.
You're right.
Because he got sickly and they took him up there. They would have had to cut another hole for him to have
Mhm.
been there with his son, I would think.
Yeah, that's really.
Sorry, Ashley.
No, go ahead, Steph.
The weird thing that I found out with the Night 4 and them digging these 79 holes or 80 is that the Night's Fort is able to hold captives. They have ice cells and then like stone cells as well. So it's weird that they would particularly build them on top of the wall. Like wouldn't it still symbolize the same thing if they were in the dungeons as well? Like it doesn't make sense why it was particularly at the top of the wall for their punishment, right?
It does to me. Because to my way of thinking, and correct me if I'm wrong, it makes sense that they're the watchers on the wall. So
Mhm.
therefore, they would have to dig the holes on the top of the wall and encase them on the top of the wall. We are the watchers on the wall. And as far as the ice cells, yeah, I don't know how the people live in them ice cells and survive. They put them in there and they supposedly live in there for, at least several days. We've had examples. So, I don't understand what it is, how they must have holes or something bored in there. I know they do, but yeah, they're the watching and they would be facing north to um, watch for the night.
Mhm. I just had a really weird thought. I just had a weird thought about cold hands. Is I mean, if there's any way this is possibly could be true, but I wonder if cold hands has anything to do with the 79 Sentinels.
I don't know, Ashley. It
Mhm.
sounds to me like Cold Hand could be from any era of time. I mean, he's a dead body. Basically,
Yeah.
so he could be from the first men, um, right on up. So it's hard to say. But
And
as the 79 Sentinels, he would have had to have got out unless the wall cracked and the rust. You go back to the rust or something, and some kind of magic involved in it. That's the only way I could see.
yeah, or he was put in an ice cell or an ice hole like this at some time, like Jaffers and what's his name that turned into whites that they brought back into Castle Black. Strange thought I had. Probably has
um
nothing to do with him, but
I'll jump in on that. Okay, so let's say, okay, in order for me to agree with this it would seem to me that you're trying to say that the ice cells weren't a literal thing, but was more a physical thing. That the ice cell was within yourself, and that's where the correlation with cold hands comes from, because he's constantly cold from being in this ice cell. That's where I would draw the correlation from. But for me personally, I think Cold Hand Cold Hands is a Brandon of House Stark. I think it has to, and I think that has to do more with Simeon Star Eyes than anything else in the Hellhounds that he witnessed fighting.
yeah. Yeah, I think you're right too. I was just thinking, what if he was Lord Risewell? But I doubt it. I think he's a Brandon too.
But I like that theory
Yeah.
of the ice cell being more of a physical thing than a prison state, right? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know
Right? Like
exactly.
it. So
Yeah.
I like that. So that these 79 sentinels could still be atop of the wall watching, forever cursed to roam and watch. Yeah, that makes sense. But then I also have, if it is like sort of something like cold hands can't pass the black gate, right? They can't go into the wall. So like they can't pass the wall. So
Right. Yeah. So there's no way. Interesting thought anyway. So the other thing was, yeah, Simeon Star Eyes and the Hellhounds. I mean, that just says dire wolves. Or it says someone guarding the underworld. And the underworld is the night fort. Could be the night fort in this situation.
yeah, I agree with you. I think if I were to throw another tinfoil out there, the Night Fort and the Snowgate commanders went to war and both lost their heads. So if both lost their heads, you're talking about Simeon when he spins his blade. He's able to hit multiple people. So maybe from seeing them two fight, he thought just to end it, and he spun his blade around and cut both of their heads off at the same time. That's my own mind works weird, anyways.
That's cool. Just like Arthur Dane did in the show. I like that.
Yeah,
But
just
it could be a Stark reference as well, with the Worgen and using the Worgen to see, and the hellhounds and all of that, and maybe being direwolves. Just a thought.
yeah.
Yeah. Hellhounds is an interesting word to use. Go ahead, Steffi. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh no, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just humming and hawing, and I didn't realize my mic was on.
I kind of was too. It's sort of maybe it's more symbolic than anything else, the hellhounds, because it's always, to me, are associated with the underworld. But the other thing that I've found about the hellhounds, and I looked at this a long time ago when I was trying to figure out the 79 Sentinels and all this stuff, was that a hellhound, there's in Greek mythology, the dog of Hades is called Cerberus, and he's a ghostly hound that makes me think of the dire wolves at the feet of the kings of winter. So he's in the underworld. He's usually said to haunt parts of the UK and given many names. One is, I hope I don't, I mean, I'm going to butcher this name, but Madidu of the Isle of Man. And they're a common creature in fantasy fiction. Also, they're in the Hound of the Baskerville. That's where I remember hellhounds from. And that they guard the dead, so it's almost like there's a connection between the Kings of Winter and the Night Fort. Hellhounds, all of it seems to tie them in.
It's almost like they have a connection with the underworld, as in the crypts of Winterfell. And the iron, that's like going into the underworld as well. You have the iron door and such as that. And you have the iron
Yeah.
swords on the laps of the kings with the wolves at their feet. Um, they're hellhounds there as well. So you've got the Knight's Fort, which is also kind of indicative of the underworld as well, in my way of thinking. There's so many ghosts there.
Right. True. And now, actually, I just found something. I just looked up hellhounds really quick, and I just found something that said that they're also used to hunt down renegade demons and drag them back to hell, back to the underworld. So that would be kind of cool if that's the direwolves at the feet of the kings of winter's role, is to get the evil demons, which is probably the others, and drag them back to hell. Or if or the beginnings of the father or mother, knight's queen maybe, or original other is in the crypts of Winterfell, gets out, that's a way for her to get brought back in, is by the hellhounds.
That's a good thought.
It's also says that in the days preceding the end of a person's life, they will appear to the victim in dreams. The person will also hallucinate and be able to see the true face of demons when they're possessing humans. Like warging.
Okay, I'll jump in there now. Okay, so when you said that they could see the evil, when you read Sansa's like when she is at Littlefinger's place, like the fingers itself, she says that Lady was always able to spot out who was true and who wasn't. She says, but Lady's not around anymore to do that. So it's interesting that you did make that correlation. So that's good. As for the actual hellhounds, I wonder if I'm getting an echo. I'm sorry.
Seems to be.
Okay, so I also find it weird that also Cersei also brings this up too. Cersei says to Sansa, "Why don't you wait for Simeon, Star Eyes, and Aemon the Dragonite to come rescue you? It won't be long now." So it has to do with Sansa and recognizing these good and evil people. But when you're mentioning these hellhounds, like although it seems like both of them could be Starks, it also seems to me that maybe Simeon Star Eyes was a Stark and he had two direwolves, like Varamir Sixskins has 3 wolves in his pack. So who's to say that a Stark is only limited to 1 direwolf at a time? Why can't it be 2 or 3 or so on and so forth? Like, why can't he build an army? Like, look at Arya. Arya technically has an army at her back, right? So
True. Good point. Good point, Steffi.
Yeah, I love that.
Also, when it comes to the Simeon Star Eyes in the sapphire, in his eye sockets, I also was thinking of Brienne of Tarth and how her eyes, especially when she fights, are so blue that Jaime actually refers to them as stars, blue stars, which would also mimic the ice dragon as well in the sky. Also on top of that, when you think about her story with the perfect knight, like of their area, the maiden blessed him with a perfect sword and only unsheathed it 3 times, and it's called the Just Maid. So I found that like a very interesting, and the sword was only unsheathed against people who weren't mortals. They weren't like humans, they were something else. So whether that could be hellhounds or a white or another, I think there was something to go on there as well.
Well, that's really cool. I like that. you know, this is interesting. I was just looking at the rest of this hellhound thing I looked up, and it says that they will not stop once they have the scent of a person. They won't stop until they catch them. That's one of their strengths, and dragging people back to hell who need to be there. The weakness, they can be used in a number or all of these components by salt, iron nails, and explosives. So that's a little crazy. The salt and the iron is right there with the hellhounds. So just says to me it's another protector from something, an evil spirit, which the direwolves are.
Agreed.
So the only other part we have, does anybody else have any, do you want to say anything else, either of you ladies, about the hellhounds?
I'd like to mention Mad Axe quickly, and the brother that supposedly killed his brothers at the night fort. Supposedly he had a red beard, and I do find this oddly suspicious, since the kiss by fire, or the auburn hair or whatever, it's supposed to be lucky and it's supposed to be attractive. So I found that very weird, and I also found that the most likely person for this to be, for me personally, would be Duran Duradon, and his name is Bronzak, and he took the Rainwood back from the Children of the Forest. Now, if there was a pact during this time, obviously that would be against the pact, and I could see him going to the wall for this event.
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
That is a good thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's further down the line. Like, there was Durdan the Devout, who gave the Children of the Forest the Rainwood, and then his predecessor, or the person after him, not his predecessor,
right,
whatever, you know what I'm talking about. He took it away.
Okay, yeah, I'd forgotten about that. I think that's cool. So the only other thing, really, I don't really have much to add to that. I think that's perfect. I'll leave it where you left it. The only other part of the night fort that we haven't discussed is the Prentice Boys and the Thing in the Night. Share it.
I don't have anything to say on the Prentice Boys. I think it was just like a little too little vague for me. It wasn't that much to go on. As for the Andal and the Curse, I think we need to look more into the faith in order to get any information on that, because it's kind of vague as it is. Like, it could be anything. Like, what was the curse about? Like, it doesn't even explain what it was. And nothing happened either to any of the Andals so far. So
True. Or was that the curse that made them the others? I wonder. Maybe they're the Andals of old. Called down as curse. Yeah, we'll have to see. I didn't even research into who King Sherritt is, so I dropped the ball on that one.
there wasn't anything aside from that. That's why.
That's what I thought.
It was just so vague.
Yeah.
Those two, in particularly.
Yeah, maybe it's just another reference to the fact that there's a first king, you know, just like the first Barrel King, or the first king of the first men. To challenge the first king, you have a curse. So maybe it's just a reference to that.
Well, the Barrow Kings were the first men in the era before the Andals too, so that would kind of make sense that it could be that. Yeah, Knights
Mm-hmm.
King. Steffi, you want to go on with that?
Do the Night's King.
Do it. Okay. Okay. This is a kind of long one. I'll quote it really quickly because just to give a reference. Okay. Another one of Old Nan's stories, the tale of Night King. He had been the 13th man to lead the Night's Watch. She said, a warrior who knew no fear. And that was the fault in him, she would add, for all men must know fear. A woman was his downfall. A woman glimpsed him from atop the wall, with skin as white as the moon and eyes like blue stars. Fearing nothing, he chased her and caught her and loved her. Through her, though her skin was cold as ice, and when he gave his seed, he gave her. Oh shit. Okay, sorry. He gave his soul as well. He brought her back to the Night Fort and proclaimed her as a queen and himself her king. And with strange sorceries, he bound his sworn brothers to his will. For 13 years they had ruled, Night's king and his corpse queen. So finally the Starks of Winterfell and Jormungand of the Wildlings had joined to free the Watch from bondage. After his fall, and when it was found he had been sacrificing to the others, all records of the Night's King had been destroyed. His very name forbidden. Some say he was a Bolton. Old Nan would always end. Some say a Magnar out of Skagos. Some say Umber, Flint, or Nori. Some would have you think that he was a Woodfoot from them who ruled Bear Island before the Iron Men came. He never was. He was a Stark, the brother of the man who brought him down. He was a Stark of Winterfell, and who can say? Mayhaps his name was Brandon. Night's King was only a man by light of day, Old Nan would always say, but the night was his to rule, and it's getting dark. So, okay, from all of this, okay, I'll point out a few things first of all. I find it weird that supposedly when this story is told, Mira was at the top of the wall, and she waved at Orel, the eagle, and she was like, hey. So the way that they write that she was spotted atop the wall, it's almost like it could be used that she was at the bottom of the wall or she was at the top of the wall, and it also doesn't reference what direction she was in, which again goes back to the Corpse Queen and the Barrow King and his daughter. So I think that's very interesting. And also I find it weird that they mentioned Skagos. When I think of Skagos, I think of Bael the Bard and him using Deceiver of Stone, right, which is his name, right, like translated. So I find it really weird that they threw that in there. And yeah, that's about it for right now.
Well, I found it interesting that he was the 13th commander and he ruled for 13 years. If that's what I heard correct. That's that numerology coming into play right there again. Before the sevens, the faith of the seven and the 13s and the threes and so on and so forth. Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, I'm always muted. Sorry.
Ashley?
I'm muted and I can't unmute for some reason. There we go.
There you
Can
are.
You hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to mute like 4.
Well, I think we're going to have a muting problem with over there. Ashley, I think we lost her. Steffi, you there? Go ahead.
You want me to go? Sorry, I was in the chat. Okay. So, okay, number one, I have when this the story came up, all I kept thinking about was Damper and Euron at the Kingsmoot. Like at first, I don't really think about it, right? I think it's just a story, and I need to keep a lookout for what's going on. But this is the quote from Elrond's chapter, and it's Euron talking at the Kingsmoot as well. They pray to trees and golden idols and goat-head abominations, false gods. And this is Euron. Just so, said Euron, and for that sin I killed them all. I spilled their blood upon the sea, and so their screaming women with me seed. Their little gods cannot stop me, so plainly they are false gods. I am more devout than even you, Euron. Perhaps it should be you who kneels to me for blessing. So again, you come into this whole thing with the golden idols, which is the queen's crown, right? It's very weird that it comes up there. They pray to trees, which is the old gods, which is also in reference to the Nightborn and the tree sprouting out of the ground. I spill their blood upon the sea, which is again the whole thing about killing the brothers there with Mad Axe, and then you have the Soldier screaming women with me seed, which would probably reference how the Night's King took his soul away. It just goes on. But who it actually is. Now, I'd like to give credit to Tony Teflon for this, because actually he was the first one. Like, I had an idea about who it was, but I was kind of scared to put it out there because I've been shot down before about it. So, but he explains it amazingly, and I would suggest people to go check out his channel and check that out, because I would like the way he just explains it. He kills it. But it's basically who the Night's King is for me is King Brandon Stark, Ice Eyes. He was the great-grandson of Edric Snowbeard Stark. He recaptured the wolf's den from slavers from the Stepstones during a long, cruel winter. He stripped the slavers naked and gave them to the ex-slaves changed up in the dungeons. They, among other ancestors, like Sir Bartimaeus, hung the entrails in the branches of the heart tree as an offering to the old gods. Now, when it comes to Brandon Stark reclaiming the wolf's den, you have the Grey Starks also ruled the wolf's den, and they're basically a branch off of the Starks themselves. And supposedly they joined the Red Kings during this time to basically destroy the Starks, and they were unsuccessful. But I do find it weird that Royce II Bolton and Royce IV Bolton both successfully burnt Winterfell. Now, if during Edric's time in power, which is his grandfather, he basically built the outer walls of Winterfell, which makes me believe that during this time, one of these Boltons did end up joining the Grey Starks, and did overthrow them and did burn it, and this is the reason why Edric had to rebuild or build the outer walls of Winterfell. Now, as for the offering to the old gods, I do find it weird that Royce Bolton, like the red arm guy, he used to tear out entrails too, and he also used to make skins. And if this was a norm back then, you also have to think that it could, if a Boltons were skinning Starks and wearing them as cloaks, the Faceless Man, that sort of esque magic, it could be possible that it wasn't in fact a Stark, but it was a voice that was pretending to be a Stark. That could be it too, and this could be it. But the main point, and then you have the Barrow Kings and the Corpse Queen. Now, like, who this other brother is, aside from the Brandon Ice Eyes Stark, there's so many possibilities of during this time. Like, you have Edwin the Spring King. If the Night's King ruled for 13 years and then had to be overthrown, it would be indicative that during this time, it was during a second long night, and he needed to be overthrown. So Edwin the Spring King could have overthrown him. It could have been Brandon the Bad. Like, there's so many options. Walton the Moon King, which would also make sense, because if it's nighttime, then there would be the moon. there's it's just so many options on who this other brother, or maybe possibly stepbrother, because I do believe that Bael the Bard, I don't believe Bael the Bard, the timing of that is correct. I don't think it had anything to do with the Andals. I think it's really weird that everyone points to the King's Road and all these other little factors when there's a really big one, which is the supposed person, the supposed Bolton was skinning during this time, which is forbidden during the Andal phases. Like, you're talking about, like, Ramsay does skin the boys, but the thing is, he doesn't go around wearing his cloaks. He mentions it, that he does it to the Six Spear Wives, but it's there's no proof thus far that he's actually wearing the cloaks. And I don't think, yeah, it's just, for me, there's Bael the Bard is in another era. Also, and so the whole stepbrother thing matches up for me. But then the proof of this for me was in Bran, A Dance of Dragons, and I'll quote that. Then as he watched, a bearded man, which would be Edric Snowbeard Stark, faced the captive down onto his knees before a heart tree. A white-haired woman stepped towards them through a drift of dark red leaves, a bronze sickle in her hand. "No," said Bran. "No, don't." But when they could not hear him, no more than his father had, the woman grabbed the captive by the hair, hooked the sickle around his throat, and slashed. And through the mist of centuries, the broken boy could only watch as the man's feet drummed against the earth. But as his life flowed out of him in a red tide, Brandon Stark could taste the blood. This is also one of the few times that it mentions, like, it's almost like there are two Brandons in the same sentence. Like, Brandon Stark tasted the blood. Like, it's also when Cold Hand says, "I'm your monster, Brandon Stark." It's almost like there's, when I explain the Werewood network and how that works in the Godhood, it's almost like the Brandon Stark of a previous Green Seer is also in the tree, and he's tasting the blood, who's also Brandon Stark, and Brandon Stark is also feeling that emotion on top of that, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's just, yeah, for me, that's what it pans out to.
That does make sense, Steffi. And as far as the Boltons skinning the Starks and wearing their cloaks, I think that they wanted to be wargs, and the Starks killed all the warg kings and married all their daughters, so there was nowhere else to get a warg, to marry into the wargs at that time. So I think that's when they started skinning the Starks and wearing their cloaks so they could become skin changers.
Yeah, I agree. I always look up numbers and numerology because I like numerology anyway, but every time I see a number in these books, I always look them up to see what they mean. And I had remembered George saying that he'd used Zoroastrianism, the religion, in these books. And I think it's I think it's for lore, but it could be the many-faced God, but I think it's for lore that he uses the Zoroastrianism. And it was a Persian it was a Persian Iranian religion. 13 was wicked and sinister in that religion. And so the 13th day of each new Iranian year, it's considered a day when evil's power might cause trouble for people, like make things go wrong. So it's like the day of evil. And when in lunar and solar worship in ancient times, in like the beginning of civilization, we always worshipped lunar goddesses, always matriarchal societies. Changed to solar deities, male deities. And so sometimes this makes me wonder if that's the change, that it changes from worshiping a lunar goddess, the night's queen, to worshiping a sun king, a sun god, like Mithras or Jesus or somebody like that. That it marks that time in history. That's really all I can come up with about this and not go on and on. Because when that happened, they had to change the calendars. When they decided the number 13 was evil, they had to change the calendars because there were actually 13 months in the lunar year. But they took the 13th month out because it was supposedly evil and made 12. That's why we have leap years. So, I mean, it's part of why we have leap years. So it's just one of those things that you didn't need to do. It's a superstition. So it just, some parts of it make me wonder about, of the legend has been, you know, I mean, it's not even written. So how much of the legend is even remembered or told correctly in any way? But yeah, it for some reason feels to me like the Royce Red Arm kind of thing you were talking about. I always think about that when I think of the Night's King.
That's amazing, Ashley. I wouldn't have ever thought of that. Just bomb dropped. It's pretty epic.
Thanks. I love numerology. It's so fun.
Yeah,
It's
that is
interesting.
good. 13th commander of the 13th year, so I'd say that was a very bad year.
That was
Bad
the worst.
number.
Yeah, could be it.
I just want to add something too. What I find weird with this 13th and the initial 13th Lord Commander is that when the Night's Watch was made, or this thing with the person who went to go seek the children of the forest, like this last hero, were those people the original, like, Night's Watch Lord Commanders? Like, did they all take an oath together to go hunt for the children of the forest? And the only reason why he's called the 13th Lord Commander is because the other ones died during this process, and he was just like, it could have been just like technically 2 Lord Commanders after the long night, the initial one.
Yeah. That's really cool.
That's a good thought. Yeah, like that.
It is, because you never know how the Night's Watch started and why they were so strong and then they fell apart. So maybe they did have more than one person leading them. The French Revolution or the French Renaissance, and the way that they talk about America and democracy, the idea of democracy, that, oh, you guys are, if you do that, it's going to become tyranny of the majority and you're going to get out of control. So don't do it. It was always written by French philosophers. Just don't do it. Don't do the democracy thing. It doesn't turn out well. So I wonder if it relates to that somehow too.
Well, it obviously didn't turn out very well for the French aristocracy. The democracy didn't.
Well, a Night's Watch is the most democratic, besides, yeah, the Night's Watch really is the only one who elects their own leader.
In this world, yeah, they are, I think.
Mm-hmm. I wondered if it had some odd, kind of connotation to it, where saying that democracy really doesn't work, because that's what a lot of writers said in the 18th century, 19th century.
Yeah, but even on the wall, there's may have a democracy, but there's still politicians and politicking going on at the wall even today. You know how Sam and all of them got together and they chose who they wanted basically. Anything else, girls?
I think I'm good. That was a great discussion.
Yeah,
Yes, it
that was
was.
good.
Yeah, it was. Well, we got through it. We did good, and I thank you, girls. I think we're going to wind it up. We'll start with Ashley, go to Steffi, let you tell them where you are, what you do, and y'all come back and see us. This is the She Wolves, the winner, and goodbye. And hey, chat, thank you so much. We love you. We appreciate you, and y'all keep coming back.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I'm Ashley from the Iron Underneath, and it was really, really fun talking about Bran and all the most of my favorite, some of my favorite parts, most of my favorite parts of the story with my favorite ladies. So thank you so much for being here, all of you. Appreciate you all the time.
Great discussion, ladies. It was definitely a lengthy one. But yeah, like I am so surprised with what we discussed tonight. Like it's a lot to chew on. I'll probably rewatch this video to be honest. It was amazing. Thanks for the chat. I know it's late and a lot of people jumped out, but thanks for watching most of it and the thumbs up you guys gave us. And can't wait to see you next time.
Bye.